My ex-wife's new husband, a corrupt police detective, and his crew entered my bar. Nice place. Your 55% profits are ours now, or we plan enough evidence to put you away forever. I told him, this is a mistake. He laughed. Are you resisting arrest? I dialed a single number. You have 90 seconds to get out. He scoffed. 80 seconds later, he stared in horror as, look, I've always had a thing for that bar door. Not in a weird way, but in the way you appreciate a good pair of jeans or a coffee pot that doesn't betray you at 6 in the morning. The door had this little squeak, nothing dramatic, just a friendly chirp that said, hey, someone's here, without being obnoxious about it. And the light? Man, the light that spilled through when someone opened it was like a lazy cat stretching across the hardwood, all golden and warm and completely unbothered by the world's nonsense. That door had personality, which is more than I could say for most of the people who walked through it on a Tuesday night. But the night Raymond Hale decided to grace my establishment with his presence, that door sounded like it had been kicked open by bad luck, wearing steel-toed boots and carrying a grudge. I'm not even exaggerating. The squeak turned into this long, protesting groan, like the hinges themselves were saying, oh hell no, not this guy. The light didn't spill in. It practically threw itself across the floor and died there, dramatic as a soap opera actress who just discovered her evil twin. Raymond moved like he already owned the city, which I guess technically he kind of did, seeing as how he had a badge and a severely inflated sense of his own importance. His badge was half tucked into his belt like he couldn't decide whether he wanted to intimidate people or seduce them, and his gun glinted under my carefully curated mood lighting in a way that screamed, I'm compensating for something, but let's not talk about therapy. But it was his smile that really sold the whole package. This wide, toothy grin that said he genuinely enjoyed watching other people's misfortune the way normal humans enjoy watching puppies play in snow. He wasn't alone, because guys like Raymond never are. He had a crew with him, 4 guys squeezed into cheap leather jackets that were trying so hard to be intimidating, but really just looked like they'd been shoplifting from a Spirit Halloween clearance rack. One of them had a neck tattoo of a scorpion that was so badly done it looked more like an angry shrimp. Another one kept cracking his knuckles like he'd seen it in a movie and thought it made him look tough. But really he just seemed like he had arthritis and poor life choices. My regulars? Oh, they froze up like fish on a dock at noon in July. Dead silent, eyes wide, drinks halfway to their mouths in this perfect tableau of, oh crap, is this actually happening? Old Eddie, who normally couldn't shut up about his fantasy football league even if you paid him, suddenly discovered the fascinating intricacies of his beer label. Rita, who'd been laughing at something on her phone 3 seconds earlier, went completely still like a deer that just heard a twig snap in hunting season. Even the jukebox, and I swear I'm not making this up, coughed once, sputtered like it was choking on its own song, and went completely quiet. The universe itself was holding its breath. Raymond crossed the floor like he was walking a red carpet, his cheap cologne arriving a full 3 seconds before he did. He leaned on my counter. My counter, the one I'd spent 2 weekends refinishing because I actually give a damn about craftsmanship, and ran his hand over the wood like he was auditioning for the role of man who ruins good things just because he can. His fingers left little smudge marks on the polish, and I died a little inside. Nice place, he said, and his teeth were all showing in that smile that wasn't really a smile so much as a threat wearing a costume. Real cozy. Real profitable, I bet. I didn't say anything. I've learned over the years that sometimes the best response is none at all, especially when dealing with people who clearly rehearsed their villain monologue in the bathroom mirror that morning. He leaned in closer, and I could smell the combination of bad decisions and expensive whiskey on his breath. Here's how this is gonna work, Ward. Your 55% profits? They're ours now. Monthly. In cash. Unmarked bills would be nice, but we're not picky. He paused, letting that number hang in the air like a bad smell. Or, and this is option B, we plan enough evidence in this little establishment to put you away forever. Evidence is funny like that. It just shows up sometimes, you know? In the damnedest places. 55%. The number sounded like arithmetic and a death threat had gotten together and had a baby, and that baby grew up to be an accountant with sociopathic tendencies. I took a slow sip of my drink. Bourbon, neat, because I'm not an animal, and let the silence stretch out between us like taffy. This is a mistake, I said, my voice calm as a bedtime story about bunnies and rainbows. Raymond laughed, actually threw his head back and laughed like I'd just delivered the punchline to his absolute favorite joke. His crew joined in, a chorus of hyenas who probably didn't even get what was funny but knew their cue when they heard it. A mistake. Raymond wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. The only mistake here is thinking you have a choice, buddy. So what's it gonna be? Partnership or prison? Door number 1 or door number 2? He leaned back, supremely confident, one hand resting on his gun like it was a comfort blanket. Behind him, his cheap leather crew stood there trying to look menacing, and honestly, they were doing an okay job if you squinted and had never actually met anyone genuinely scary. Are you resisting arrest? Raymond asked, his grin getting wider. Because I can make that happen right now. I got witnesses. My guys here will swear you attacked me. It'll be a whole thing. Paperwork, court dates, orange jumpsuits, the works. I reached into my pocket slowly, didn't want anyone getting twitchy, and pulled out my phone. I pressed one number. Just one. Speed dial is a beautiful thing when you plan ahead. The call connected, and I said, calm as Sunday morning, loud enough for everyone to hear. You've got 90 seconds to get out. Raymond's grin faltered for just a second, like a light bulb flickering before it dies. What? 90 seconds? I repeated, glancing at my watch. Actually, 89 now. Time flies when you're committing extortion. He scoffed, puffing his chest out like a pigeon who'd just discovered steroids. You threatening me? You threatening a police officer? That's bold. That's stupid, but it's bold. I didn't answer. Just sipped my bourbon and watched the seconds tick by on my watch. Somewhere in the background, the jukebox was still silent, holding its breath right along with everyone else. You're bluffing, Raymond said, but his voice had lost some of its swagger. His crew shifted uncomfortably, expensive leather creaking. 80 seconds later, the first distant siren started wailing, getting closer. Raymond's grin disappeared completely, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like a man realizing he was the punchline after all. People always get this weird look on their faces when I tell them I built this place with my pension and stubbornness. Like I just told them I won the lottery or robbed a bank or discovered a treasure map in my grandma's attic. Nope, nothing that exciting. Just 23 years of grinding it out as a construction foreman, saving every penny I didn't absolutely need to spend on rent and reasonably priced beer, and deciding that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to own something that wasn't covered in someone else's bad decisions. My name is Liam Ward, and if that sounds boring and completely unmemorable, well, congratulations on being perceptive. I'm not the guy who walks into a room and makes everyone turn their heads. I'm the guy who's already in the corner, nursing a drink and watching everyone else make fools of themselves, taking mental notes for later. I spent my entire adult life pouring concrete and late nights and cheaper than cheap coffee into other people's buildings, watching other people's dreams take shape, while mine sat in a savings account gathering interest at a rate that would make a snail look ambitious. The bar, Ward's Tavern, because I'm incredibly creative with names, took me 3 years to build. Not literally build, because I'm not that much of a masochist, but 3 years from, hey, wouldn't it be nice to own a bar, to actually turning the key in the lock on opening night and thinking, holy hell, I actually did this. I found the space in a neighborhood that was trying really hard to be trendy, but hadn't quite figured it out yet. You know the type? Couple of vintage clothing stores, a coffee shop where the barista judges your order, a yoga studio that smells like desperation and patchouli. The previous owner had run it into the ground the way you'd expect someone to run a bar into the ground when they think business plan is something other people worry about. The place was called Shots and Thoughts, which should tell you everything you need to know about the guy's decision-making skills. When I took over, there were still motivational posters on the walls with eagles and sunsets and words like synergy in fonts that screamed 2003. I burned those posters, had a little ceremony and everything. Eddie, who'd eventually become a regular, helped me, and we toasted with cheap champagne that tasted like carbonated regret. I gutted the place, refinished everything, and turned it into something that actually felt like a bar instead of a corporate retreat for people having midlife crises. I wanted exposed brick and warm lighting and a jukebox that played actual good music instead of whatever algorithmic nightmare the kids are into these days. I wanted a place where you could come in, sit down, and feel like you weren't being judged for ordering whiskey at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday because, Let's be honest, Tuesdays are garbage, and we all know it. The bar gave me a rhythm I didn't know I needed. Regulars started showing up. Eddie with his fantasy football obsession, Rita with her terrible Tinder dates that she'd narrate like true crime podcasts, Marcus who worked nights at the hospital and needed somewhere quiet to decompress before going home to his 3 kids who apparently never slept. There were jokes, the honest clink of glasses, the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every second with noise. It was good. It was really damn good. I didn't expect my life to include divorce papers and insults. But hey, life is a messy playlist that someone else is controlling, and sometimes they've got terrible taste in music. Sophie. Let's talk about Sophie, because you can't understand why I did what I did without understanding her. Sophie Romano. Well, Sophie Hale now, but we'll get to that nightmare. Used to sit at stool 3 back when we were married. Stool 3, right at the end of the bar where she could watch me work and pretend not to care if I burned dinner or forgot to pick up milk or committed any of the other tiny domestic crimes that apparently add up over time until someone decides they're done. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made me feel like I was constantly underdressed for my own life. Dark hair, sharp wit, the kind of smile that could make you forget you were supposed to be mad about something. She worked in real estate. Commercial properties, the kind of deals that involved a lot of zeros and men in suits who said things like, "Let's circle back on that," without any sense of irony. She was good at it too. Ambitious. Driven. All those words people use when someone wants more than what they currently have and isn't afraid to step on a few toes to get there. We were happy, I think. Or maybe we were just comfortable, and I couldn't tell the difference because I'm an idiot who thought good enough was the same as good. She'd come to the bar after work, still in her power suit and heels that made her 3 inches taller, and she'd sit at stool 3 and tell me about her day. The difficult clients, the deals that fell through, the ones that didn't. I'd make her a gin and tonic, Tanqueray, never the cheap stuff, extra lime, and listen. Sometimes I'd contribute something useful. Mostly I'd just nod and wipe down glasses and feel grateful that someone like her had chosen someone like me. Turns out gratitude isn't the same as enough. She left me for ambition and a man with a badge and what I can only describe as a private jet of moral bankruptcy. Raymond Hale. Yeah, that Raymond Hale. The same one who just walked into my bar, trying to shake me down like some kind of discount movie villain. They met at some charity fundraiser thing. Cops and real estate developers schmoozing over champagne and pretending they cared about underprivileged youth or whatever cause was trendy that quarter. Raymond was already a detective then, already on his way up the ladder, already building his little empire of side deals and convenient friendships. Sophie called me on a Wednesday. Not even the decency of a Friday or a Monday. Just a random Wednesday in October when I was restocking the bar and thinking about what to make for dinner. She said we needed to talk, which is code for your life is about to get significantly worse. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. And she slid the divorce papers across the table like she was closing a real estate deal. Professional. Efficient. No tears, no drama. Just, I think we want different things, and you'll always be important to me, and other phrases people use when they're trying to convince themselves they're not the bad guy. 6 months later, I got a text. Midweek again, because apparently that's her thing. Raymond and I got married. Thought you should know. No details, no invitation to the wedding I definitely wouldn't have attended. Just a heads up, like she was letting me know she'd changed her phone plan. I thought I had closure. I really did. I threw myself into the bar, made jokes about being single again, told my customers funny stories about the divorce that made it sound like no big deal. Yeah, my ex left me for a cop. Guess she wanted someone who could legally carry a weapon. I just carry emotional baggage, which is apparently less impressive. People laughed. I laughed. Everyone laughed, and if the laughter felt a little hollow, well, nobody mentioned it. Turns out closure is something Raymond sells in bulk to people like him. Guilt with a 2-year warranty and an extended protection plan that doesn't actually protect you from anything. And when Raymond and his discount leather crew swaggered into my bar and tried to take it from me with threats and that insufferable grin, I decided to make their evening significantly more interesting than they planned. Here's the thing about catching a dirty cop. You don't do it on a whim, and you definitely don't do it because you're feeling petty about your ex-wife marrying the guy. I mean, the pettiness helps. It's like premium fuel for the revenge engine, but you need actual evidence. Real, Tangible, hold-up-in-court evidence. Not just a gut feeling that someone's a grade-A dirtbag with a badge and a superiority complex. You catch a guy like Raymond on spaghetti threads of paperwork and his own sloppy arrogance. And let me tell you, Raymond had arrogance in bulk, industrial quantities. The kind of confidence that comes from years of getting away with things because nobody bothered to look too close, or because the people who did look decided their careers were more important than doing the right thing. The first thread came from Jax. Jax Martinez is my buddy from way back. We did construction together before he discovered he had a brain for computers, and I discovered I had a tolerance for drunk people's stories. Jax is half genius and half coffee, and I'm not entirely convinced he has blood in his veins instead of cold brew. The guy lives in hoodies that cost more than my monthly beer budget, types about 900 words per minute, and has the kind of posture that makes chiropractors weep. He's also exactly the kind of person you want on your side when you need to dig through digital dirt. Jax pinged me on a random Thursday with a message that just said, "Yo, weird wire transfer, you busy?" I was restocking olives and wondering why anyone orders dirty martinis anymore. So no, I wasn't busy. We met at his apartment, which looked less like a living space and more like a server farm that occasionally housed a human. He had 6 monitors set up in an array that probably violated some kind of fire code, energy drink cans forming a small pyramid on his desk, and a cat named Algorithm who judged me from atop a gaming chair. So I was doing some freelance work, Jax started, which is code for I was poking around places I probably shouldn't be, but technically didn't break any laws. He pulled up a spreadsheet that made my eyes cross. And I found this transfer. 50 grand from a company called Triborough Solutions to an account under the name Patricia Mendez. Okay, I said, because that meant absolutely nothing to me. Patricia Mendez is the PTA president at Riverside Elementary. She's a substitute teacher. She drives a 2015 Honda Civic. She does not have 50 grand lying around. Jax took a sip of something that smelled like it could power a small aircraft. But you know who does have connections to Triborough Solutions? Raymond Hale. His cousin runs it. On paper, they do logistics consulting, which is business speak for we move things and don't ask questions. I felt something click in my brain, like a puzzle piece finding its spot. Can you trace where the money came from originally? Jax grinned, which is what he does when you ask him to do something mildly illegal that he's absolutely going to do anyway. Can birds fly? Can Rita make poor dating choices? Of course I can. While Jax did his digital archaeology, I reached out to Lana Prescott. Lana's a public defender who drinks coffee like it's oxygen, and she's trapped in a submarine that's running out of air. We met during a particularly ugly case a few years back, where one of my regulars got caught up in something stupid, and she got him out of it with the kind of legal maneuvering that would make TV lawyers jealous. She's sharp, cynical, perpetually exhausted, and has exactly zero patience for cops who think their badge makes them bulletproof. I caught her at her office, which looked like a paper factory had exploded, and then apologized by sending more paper. She was surrounded by case files, her hair in a messy bun held together by what appeared to be a pen, wearing a suit that had seen better days and probably better years. "Liam," she said without looking up from whatever document she was murdering with a highlighter. "If you're here to confess to something, I'm going to need more coffee first." "I need your brain," I said, sliding into the chair across from her desk that was occupied by approximately 7 folders. I moved them. She didn't care. My brain is currently trying to understand why prosecutors think circumstantial evidence is the same as actual evidence. But sure, what's up? I told her about Raymond's visit, about the shakedown, about the 55% that he wanted to carve out of my business like. He was entitled to it. I told her about the wire transfer Jax found, about Patricia Mendez, the PTA president, who suddenly had money she shouldn't have. Lana stopped highlighting. She looked up, and her eyes did that thing where they get sharp and focused like a hawk spotting a particularly stupid rabbit. "You're building a case." "I'm collecting information." "You're building a case," she repeated. "Do you know how hard it is to take down a cop? How airtight everything needs to be? That's why I'm talking to you." She sat back, tapping her highlighter against her chin. "You need more than one wire transfer. You need a pattern. You need documentation. You need witnesses who won't suddenly develop amnesia when a detective starts asking questions." She paused. "But if you're serious about this, I know some people." The people she knew turned out to be Miriam Chun and Tomas Rivera, 2 journalists who worked for different outlets, but apparently shared a hobby of sniffing around local corruption like bloodhounds on a particularly interesting trail. Miriam wrote for the Metro Daily, covering city politics and making politicians nervous. Tomas did investigative pieces for an online publication that had a smaller audience but bigger teeth. We met at a diner at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, because apparently, that's when journalists eat lunch if they eat lunch at all. Miriam was early 30s, with glasses that kept sliding down her nose and a notebook that was already half full with writing I couldn't read from across the table. Tomas was younger, maybe late 20s, with the kind of energy that suggested he'd consumed his body weight in espresso and was considering more. So, Miriam said, not wasting time on pleasantries. Lana says you have something on Raymond Hale. Maybe, I said, because I'm not an idiot who shows all his cards immediately. We've been looking at him for months. Tomas jumped in, pulling out his phone and scrolling through something. He's dirty. We know he's dirty. Everyone knows he's dirty. But he's careful. Really careful. Nothing sticks. What have you got? I asked. Miriam and Tomas exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations people have when they've worked together long enough. Then Miriam pulled out her own phone. There's a courier company called QuickShift Logistics. On paper, they move packages. In reality, they're moving things that packages shouldn't contain. We've been tracking them for 8 months. Raymond's connected? Raymond's got his fingerprints all over it, but through about 6 layers of shell companies and cousins and friends of friends, Tomas said. There's a car lease in his cousin's name. The same cousin who runs Triborough Solutions. There are shipments that mysteriously never left a warehouse, but somehow got marked as delivered. There are receipts that don't match up with inventory logs. Little lies, Miriam added, stacked like dominoes. Individually, they're nothing. Together, they're a pattern. And that's when I realized what I was actually doing. I wasn't just defending my bar. I was starting something bigger, something that could either expose a corrupt cop or blow up spectacularly in my face and take me down with it. I started collecting everything. Every scrap, every thread, every weird coincidence that Jax found in financial records or Lana discovered in court filings or Miriam and Tomas had already documented. Little lies, stacked like dominoes, and all I had to do was find the right one to push. Not because I'm noble, let's be clear about that. Not because I'm some crusading hero who believes in truth and justice and the American way. I started collecting evidence because I'm stubborn, petty, and because I own the kind of pride you can't sell on eBay or return for store credit. Raymond walked into my bar and tried to take it from me, tried to use his badge and his threats like they were currency that bought him whatever he wanted. And I decided that currency was about to become worthless. Revenge, I discovered over the course of about 3 weeks and several sleepless nights, is approximately 60% patience, 30% technology, and 10% convincing people you aren't a complete lunatic who's about to ruin his own life for the sake of proving a point. That math might not add up perfectly, but neither does most of life. So let's not get picky about it. The first order of business was turning my bar, my lovely, honest, hard-working bar, into something that resembled a surveillance operation run by someone who'd watched too many spy movies and had access to a credit card with a decent limit. I needed cameras. Not the obvious kind that scream, "You're being recorded, please behave," but the sneaky kind that blend into the background like they're part of the furniture. The kind that catch people being their authentic, terrible selves. Jax showed up on a Sunday when the bar was closed, carrying 2 duffel bags that looked like they contained either very expensive electronics or the components for building a small robot army. Knowing Jax, it could honestly go either way. He also brought Algorithm the cat, because apparently, the cat has separation anxiety, which I didn't even know was a thing cats could have. Okay, Jax said, dumping the bags on the bar and unzipping them to reveal a tangle of wires, tiny cameras, and equipment that looked vaguely illegal. We're going to turn this place into the most well-documented bar in the tri-state area. Big Brother wishes he had this kind of setup. I'm not trying to record my regulars picking their noses, I said, watching as he pulled out a camera the size of a quarter. I need to catch Raymond being Raymond. Yeah, corrupt cop, shakedown, classic villain behavior. I got it. Jax held up the tiny camera like it was the Hope Diamond. These bad boys are motion-activated, audio-enabled, and stream directly to a secure server that I'm setting up in my apartment. Which means you're paying my internet bill for the next 6 months, by the way. Fine, And my electricity bill, because this is going to draw some serious power. Jax, I'm kidding. Mostly. He grinned and started surveying the bar like a general planning an invasion. We'll put one behind the whiskey bottles. That top-shelf stuff nobody orders unless they're trying to impress a date. One in the light fixture above the bar. One over by the jukebox. Maybe one in the corner by the bathroom hallway. Catch people when they think nobody's watching. We spent the next 4 hours installing cameras in places I never would have thought to look. Jax worked with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for surgeons or people defusing bombs, occasionally muttering things about focal lengths and bit rates that went completely over my head. Algorithms supervised from atop the bar, knocking over a salt shaker at one point just to prove cats are agents of chaos. This is some serious paranoia-level stuff. Eddie said when he showed up early for Monday happy hour and caught me adjusting a camera hidden in a decorative beer stein on the shelf. Eddie's got a sixth sense for when something weird is happening, probably from years of playing fantasy football and developing conspiracy theories about injured quarterbacks. Spring cleaning, I said, which was possibly the worst lie I'd ever told. You're installing cameras. Very thorough spring cleaning. Eddie squinted at me, then at the cameras, then back at me. Does this have something to do with those cops who came in last week? Rita told me about it. Said they look like the kind of guys who peak in high school and never recover. Rita's got away with words. Rita's got away with terrible judgment, but she's not wrong about those guys. Eddie settled onto his usual stool. You getting into something over your head, Liam? Probably, I admitted, because there was no point lying to Eddie. The guy could smell bullshit from across a football field. But I'm getting into it on purpose, which I think makes it better. That makes it worse, actually. Well, it's too late now. I'm committed. Like, fully committed. The kind of committed where you can't back out without looking stupid. Eddie considered this, then nodded slowly. All right. You need help? You let me know. I know some guys. What kind of guys? The kind of guys who know guys. It's a whole network. Very complicated. Don't worry about it. I decided not to worry about it. Jax finished the installation by Tuesday and spent Wednesday setting up what he called the command center in his apartment. He sent me a video tour that made my head hurt. 6 monitors displaying different camera angles, a keyboard that lit up like a Christmas tree, and enough computing power to probably launch a satellite or hack into the Pentagon or whatever it is computers do these days when they're not showing me cat videos. The feed is encrypted, Jax explained over the phone while I pretended to understand what encryption actually meant. Everything's backed up to 3 different secure locations. If Raymond or his goons try to delete footage, they can't. It's like trying to unring a bell, except the bell is digital and also making copies of itself. You're a weird dude, Jax. Yeah, but I'm your weird dude, and you're paying me in cash, bad jokes, and that signed baseball you promised me. The signed baseball was from a Yankees player I'd met at a charity event about 8 years ago. I didn't even like baseball that much, but Jax did, so it seemed like a fair trade for potentially illegal surveillance equipment and enough technical expertise to make the NSA jealous. While Jax handled the tech side, I needed to handle the human side, which was significantly more complicated because humans are unpredictable and have feelings and occasionally principles. I needed people who could take what I collected and turn it into something that mattered. Evidence that would hold up not just in the court of public opinion, but in an actual court with an actual judge who'd actually send Raymond to actual prison. That's where Agent Marcus Ray came in. Agent Ray was FBI, federal, which meant he operated on a different level than local cops, and had exactly zero patience for local cops who made the entire profession look bad. Lana set up the meeting through some connection she had from law school, or a previous case, or possibly a Tinder date gone surprisingly well. I met him at a park at 7 in the morning because apparently, federal agents are morning people who enjoy ruining everyone else's sleep schedule. Ray looked exactly like what you'd expect an FBI agent to look like if you'd only ever seen FBI agents in movies. Clean cut, suit that probably cost more than my car, expression that suggested he'd seen some things and wasn't impressed by most of them. He was drinking coffee from a travel mug and feeding ducks, which felt weirdly wholesome for someone whose job involved catching criminals. Liam Ward, he said when I approached, not bothering with a handshake. You're the bartender building a case against Detective Raymond Hale. I'm the bartender who's tired of being shaken down by Detective Raymond Hale. I corrected. Building a case is more of a side hobby. Ray almost smiled. Almost. Lana speaks highly of you. Says you're stubborn and possibly insane, but surprisingly thorough. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. He tossed some more bread to the ducks, who were attacking it like they hadn't eaten in weeks. Here's the situation. I can't officially help you. Internal Affairs is already looking at Hale, but they're moving slow because everyone's afraid of stepping on toes. Politics, procedure, all that bureaucratic nonsense that lets guilty people stay free. So what can you do? I can be in the right place at the right time if someone were to provide credible evidence of an ongoing crime. He looked at me directly. Emphasis on credible. Emphasis on ongoing. You give me solid proof that Hale is actively committing a felony. I can move fast. Really fast. But it has to be airtight. No gaps. No questions. No room for his lawyer to wiggle through. I'm installing cameras. I didn't hear that. They're definitely not in my bar right now. Still not hearing anything. Ray finished his coffee. You get what you need, you call me. Day or night. I'll handle the rest. Back at the bar, Lana helped me organize everything into what she called legal scaffolding, which sounded impressive but really just meant putting things in folders with labels and making sure everything had dates and times and wasn't going to get thrown out because I'd violated chain of custody or some other legal concept I barely understood. Every file needs metadata, she explained, surrounded by printouts and post-it notes and enough highlighters to stock an office supply store. Every recording needs a timestamp. Every transfer needs a source document. We're building a story here, and stories need structure. I kept a master folder with everything. Wire transfers Jax traced, photos Miriam and Tomas had collected, receipts that didn't add up, timestamps of who went where when. I even made a playlist of jokes to lighten the mood if anyone started crying, because this whole operation was stressful enough without everyone having emotional breakdowns. By the time I was done, my bar looked the same but felt completely different. Every light fixture, every shelf, every corner had eyes. I was ready. Now I just needed Raymond to walk back in and be himself. Raymond Hale was greedy the way raccoons are greedy. Bright, shiny interest in anything labeled cash, or easy, or nobody will notice if this goes missing. He had that particular brand of arrogance that comes from getting away with things for so long that you start to believe you're invincible, like the universe itself has granted you some kind of special exemption from consequences. Which meant that all I had to do was dangle something shiny in front of him and watch him waddle over like a kid at a carnival heading straight for the cotton candy stand. The plan was simple, which is usually a good sign because complicated plans are where things go wrong and people end up accidentally setting themselves on fire or whatever. I needed Raymond to come back to the bar. I needed him to feel comfortable, confident, superior. I needed him to talk. And the best way to make someone like Raymond talk is to make him think he's already won. So I started a rumor. Not directly, because I'm not an amateur who announces his plans on a megaphone. No, I let it slip casually to Derek, one of my regulars who works in construction and has the unique distinction of knowing approximately everyone in a 10-block radius. Derek's the kind of guy who could tell you the life story of his mailman's cousin's dog groomer. He's a gossip, but the useful kind. The kind who spreads information faster than the internet and with about the same level of accuracy. Business has been good. I mentioned to Derek on a Thursday afternoon while he was nursing his second beer and complaining about his boss. Really good, actually. Been hosting some private events. Cash only. High rollers, you know? People who like their privacy. Derek's eyebrows went up so fast they nearly achieved liftoff. Cash only? Like, under the table? Like, people who prefer not to have their credit cards show up on statements that their wives might see. I said, which wasn't technically a lie because I had hosted exactly one bachelor party 6 months ago where the groom paid in cash because he was paranoid about his fiancée finding out about the stripper. There was no stripper. The guy was just paranoid. But Derek didn't need to know that. Damn, Liam. That's smart. You must be pulling in serious money. Let's just say I'm not worried about rent this month. I wiped down the bar like this was all very casual and not at all a carefully orchestrated performance. Or next month. Or the month after that. I watched Derek's brain work. Could practically see the gears turning as he calculated how long it would take him to tell this story to someone else. I gave it about 4 hours. He lasted 3. By Friday, at least 6 people had mentioned hearing about my exclusive cash events, with the kind of knowing wink that suggested they thought I was running an underground casino or a speakeasy for rich people with questionable ethics. By Saturday, Rita asked me if I was doing something illegal because if you are, that's hot. But also please don't go to prison because you make good drinks. I'm not doing anything illegal, I told her, which was true. I'm just letting people believe what they want to believe. That's basically the same thing as lying. It's strategically ambiguous truth-telling. You're going to get yourself killed, Rita said. But she said it fondly, the way you tell a friend they're an idiot, but you love them anyway. The fake ledger was Lana's idea, actually. She suggested I create a document that looked official enough to be believable, but fake enough that anyone with half a brain could tell it wasn't real. Except Raymond wouldn't look that closely, because people like Raymond don't look closely at things that confirm what they already want to believe. So I made a ledger. Used Excel, which I barely know how to use because I'm not a spreadsheet person. I listed a bunch of dates, some fictional events with names like Private Party, Johnson, and Corporate Mixer, Tech Startup, and numbers that seemed impressive but not so impressive that they'd be obviously fake. 10 grand here, 15 grand there, a $20,000 event that was supposedly some CEO's birthday party. Then I accidentally left it on the bar one evening when Derek was there, along with some other papers that made it look like I'd been sorting through paperwork and got distracted. I went to the back to grab something, came back exactly 90 seconds later, and the ledger was gone. Derek was looking at his phone with the kind of studied casualness that screamed, I definitely just took a photo of something I wasn't supposed to see. Find everything okay? I asked. Yeah, man. All good. Just checking my messages. Cool. Hey, you didn't see a blue folder, did you? Had some boring tax stuff in it. Nope. Didn't see anything. I gave it 48 hours. Raymond showed up on a Tuesday, which felt appropriate because Tuesdays are generally terrible, and this particular Tuesday was about to get significantly more interesting. He didn't bring his discount leather crew this time. Just himself and one other guy who looked like he'd been grown in a lab specifically to make people uncomfortable. The guy had dead eyes and a neck like a tree trunk and the kind of energy that suggested he enjoyed his job way too much. The cameras were rolling. Jax had texted me earlier. All systems go. I'm watching from home with popcorn. This is better than Netflix. Raymond settled onto a stool like he owned it, which I guess in his mind he did. He was wearing a nicer suit this time, like he'd decided to dress up for the occasion of ruining my life. His smile was all teeth and no warmth, a shark wearing human skin. Ward, he said, my name sounding like an insult in his mouth. Heard business is booming. Cash events. High-end clientele. That's impressive for a little dive bar in a neighborhood that's still trying to figure out if it's trendy or just gentrified. Business is fine, I said carefully, pouring myself a drink because I was going to need it. Fine. Word on the street is you're pulling in 30, 40 grand a month in cash. That's more than fine. That's successful. That's the kind of success that attracts attention. He leaned forward, elbows on my bar. The kind of attention that needs proper management. Protection, even. I've got insurance. Not that kind of protection. Raymond's smile widened. See, here's the thing about cash businesses. They're vulnerable. Lots of ways things can go wrong. Robberies, fires, surprise health inspections that find violations, tax audits that discover discrepancies. You follow. I follow that you're threatening me. I'm offering partnership. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. You keep doing what you're doing. These cash events, these private parties, and we take our cut. Call it a consulting fee. Protection services. Business management. We're not greedy. 55% is more than fair. There it was. The same number from last time. Like he'd decided that 55 was his lucky percentage and he was sticking with it. 55%, I repeated. For what exactly? For making sure your business stays successful. For making sure certain people don't ask certain questions about where all that cash is going. Raymond gestured to his tree trunk companion. For making sure you don't have any accidents. You'd be surprised how many bar owners have accidents. I let him talk. God, did I let him talk? Raymond had the kind of ego that needed an audience, and once he got started, he couldn't stop. He bragged about his shell companies. Triborough Solutions handles all kinds of logistics. You'd be amazed what moves through there. And his cousins who signed papers faster than they chewed gum. No questions asked. He mentioned a shipment that had gone missing from a warehouse. How convenient it was when inventory records didn't match up with what actually got delivered. It's all about knowing how the system works, Raymond said, warming to his subject like a professor giving a lecture on corruption. People think it's hard to move money around, but it's easy if you know the right people. You set up an LLC under someone else's name. My cousin Patricia, sweet lady, substitute teacher, would never hurt a fly, and boom, you've got a clean account. You run transactions through 3 or 4 companies, keep everything under 10 grand so it doesn't trigger reports, and nobody notices. It's beautiful, really. Elegant. The cameras were getting all of this. Every word, every casual admission, every arrogant grin. Sounds complicated, I said. It's necessary, Raymond corrected. In this city, you either adapt or you get eaten. I adapted. And now you're going to adapt, or... He shrugged, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Or what? Or we have a problem. And trust me, Ward, you don't want problems with me. I sipped my drink and thought about the cameras recording every frame of his smug face, about Jax watching from his apartment, and probably recording additional commentary, about Lana organizing everything into neat legal files, about Agent Ray waiting for the call. I'll think about it, I said. Raymond's grin got wider. That's smart. You think about it. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. He left, his tree trunk companion following like a shadow. The bar felt cleaner after they were gone, like opening windows after someone's been smoking inside. I pulled out my phone, looked at the camera feeds Jax had given me access to. Crystal clear footage of Raymond admitting to shell companies, money laundering, extortion. Got you, I said to the empty bar. The joke, as it turned out, was definitely on him. Raymond came back exactly 1 week later, which showed a surprising amount of restraint for a guy who basically operated on the principle of, I want it now, and I want it with a side of intimidation. I'd expected him to show up the next day, all impatient and pushy, but no, he waited a full 7 days, probably to let me think about it, like he'd suggested, as if I was actually going to spend a week contemplating whether I wanted to hand over 55% of my business to a corrupt cop with a god complex and a smile that could curdle milk. It was a Wednesday evening, because apparently Wednesday was the universal day for bad things happening in my life. The bar was moderately busy, not packed, but enough people that Raymond's entrance would have an audience, which I suspect was exactly what he wanted. Eddie was there, arguing with Marcus about whether Tom Brady was actually a system quarterback or genuinely talented. Rita was on her phone, probably swiping left on some poor guy whose only crime was having a fish picture in his dating profile. A couple of tourists were by the jukebox trying to figure out if any of the songs were from this decade. Spoiler, they weren't. The door opened with that familiar squeak, except this time it sounded less like bad luck and more like inevitability. Raymond walked in with his full crew this time, the original 4 guys in their discount leather jackets, plus tree trunk neck guy from last week, plus 2 additional men who looked like they'd failed the police academy physical exam, but made up for it with enthusiasm for questionable activities. 7 guys total. Raymond really wanted to make an impression. They spread out across the bar in a formation that was probably supposed to look tactical, but really just looked like they'd watched too many cop shows and thought standing near exits made them look professional. Raymond himself headed straight for the bar, moving with that particular swagger of someone who thinks they've already won and is just here to collect their prize. Ward, he said, settling onto the same stool he'd occupied last week. Time's up. Decision time. You in, or are we doing this the hard way? The cameras were rolling. All of them. Jax had sent me a text 10 minutes ago that just said, ITS showtime, with about 14 exclamation points and a gif of someone eating popcorn. Lana was on standby with Agent Ray, both of them waiting for my signal. Miriam and Tomas were parked outside in Miriam's car with their recording equipment and what I could only assume was an unhealthy amount of caffeine. Everything was ready. The stage was set. All I had to do was let Raymond be Raymond. I thought about your offer, I said slowly, like I was actually considering it. 55% seems steep. Raymond's grin was all predator. 55% of something is better than 100% of nothing, which is what you'll have after we're done with you. We can make your life very difficult, Ward. Evidence has a funny way of appearing. Health inspectors have a funny way of finding violations. The fire marshal might discover your wiring isn't up to code. These things happen. These things happen, I repeated. Just like that. Just like that. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. Except his crew could definitely still hear him, and so could every camera in the building. Here's what you don't understand. This city runs on arrangements. Everybody pays somebody. The restaurants pay, the clubs pay, the bookies and the dealers and the guys running card games in basement apartments. They all pay. You're not special. You're just another business that needs to understand how things work. And you're the guy who explains it? I'm the guy who makes it happen. He gestured around the bar like he was surveying his kingdom. You've got a good thing here. Decent location, regular customers, those cash events you've been running. Smart operation. We respect that. We want to help you keep it. For 55%. For peace of mind. Raymond's smile got wider. Think of it as insurance. You pay your premium, and nothing bad happens. You don't pay well. He shrugged. Accidents. One of his crew, the guy with the scorpion tattoo that still looked like an angry shrimp, cracked his knuckles for emphasis. It sounded like Rice Krispies, but more threatening. I need to think about it, I said, playing out the scene. You've had a week to think. Raymond's voice got harder, the friendly facade cracking just enough to show the ugliness underneath. This is the last conversation we're having. Either you agree right now, or we walk out of here, and tomorrow morning you wake up to a world of shit. Tax audit, health inspection, anonymous tips about illegal gambling, drug dealing, whatever we feel like making stick. Your bar gets shut down, you get arrested, and nobody believes the guy trying to claim a cop set him up. You understand. There it was. Clear, direct, undeniable extortion with a side of threats. Raymond had just handed me everything I needed on a silver platter, gift-wrapped with his own arrogance. I pulled out my phone slowly, watching Raymond's expression shift from confident to confused to wary. His hand drifted toward his gun, just slightly, just enough that the cameras would catch it. What are you doing? Raymond asked. Making a call. I pressed one button. Speed dial. The most important speed dial of my life. The phone rang once. Agent Ray picked up. I didn't even need to say anything specific. We'd rehearsed this. But I said it anyway, loud enough for everyone to hear. Calm as a Sunday morning when you've got nowhere to be and nothing to worry about. You've got 90 seconds to get out. The bar went quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment. The current song fading out into silence like it didn't want to interrupt a good scene. Eddie stopped mid-argument. Rita looked up from her phone. The tourists froze with their drinks halfway to their mouths. Raymond's grin flickered like a light bulb with loose wiring. What? 90 seconds. I repeated, glancing at my watch. A nice touch, very dramatic. I was proud of it. Actually, 87 now. Time flies when you're committing multiple felonies. You threatening me? Raymond's voice had an edge to it now, the confidence draining like water from a bathtub with a pulled plug. You're threatening a police officer? That's a crime, Ward. That's a serious crime. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm giving you a heads up. Professional courtesy, really. One of his crew shifted nervously. Tree trunk neck guy looked at Raymond like he was waiting for instructions. Scorpion tattoo guy's hand was shaking slightly, which would have been funny if the situation wasn't so tense. 80 seconds. I said helpfully. The first siren was distant, just a faint wail in the background like someone's car alarm going off 3 blocks away. But it was there, and it was getting closer. Raymond's expression changed. The predatory grin vanished completely, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like a man doing rapid mental calculations and not liking the results. What did you do? Me? I run a bar. I serve drinks. I mind my business. I poured myself a bourbon, neat, because I'm not an animal, and took a slow sip. You're the one who came in here threatening people, bragging about shell companies and money laundering and all those interesting arrangements you've got set up around the city. You recorded. He cut himself off, but the damage was done. The admission hung in the air like smoke. 70 seconds. More sirens now. Multiple sirens, coming from different directions, the sound building like a symphony warming up. Raymond's crew was definitely nervous now, shooting looks at each other and at the exits and at Raymond like they were waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Somewhere across town, Jax was watching this unfold on his monitors, probably recording his own commentary like a sports announcer covering the game of the century. Agent Ray was in motion, federal badges and warrants, and the kind of authority that made local cops very, very nervous. Miriam and Tomas were getting their cameras ready, preparing to document everything for the morning edition and the evening news, and probably their Pulitzers. I'd planned this moment so carefully that the timer on my phone felt like a metronome, keeping time for revenge and justice, measuring out the seconds until Raymond Hale's carefully constructed empire of corruption came crashing down around his ears. Every detail, every contingency, every possible way this could go wrong. I'd thought about it all during those long nights of organizing files and checking camera angles and making sure the evidence was absolutely airtight. "You set me up," Raymond said, and he sounded almost impressed, like he was recognizing a fellow player in the game. "You set yourself up," I corrected. "I just gave you the rope and watched you build the scaffold. Are you resisting arrest?" Raymond asked, his hand definitely on his gun now. "Because I can arrest you right now for threatening an officer, for interfering with police business, for 45 seconds. The sirens were loud now. Really loud. The kind of loud that meant multiple vehicles and serious intent. Rita had her phone out, recording. Eddie was watching with the kind of fascination people reserve for car crashes and reality TV finales. The tourists looked confused but invested, like they'd accidentally stumbled into the most interesting part of their vacation. I wanted to tell Raymond, "No, I'm not resisting arrest. I'm resisting having my life stolen by someone who needs a lesson in humility." I wanted to deliver a whole speech about justice and accountability and how badges don't make you bulletproof. But instead, I just poured another drink, because you're never too old for theatrics, and sometimes silence is more powerful than words. 30 seconds. Raymond stood up, his crew closing in around him like they were preparing for a siege. His face had gone from confident to worried to something approaching panic, and it was the most honest expression I'd seen from him yet. The siren stopped right outside. "Time's up," I said. The door opened, and Raymond's entire world changed. Unmarked cars have a very specific look to them, even when they're trying to be subtle. They're too clean, too generic, too, "I'm definitely not a cop" car, in a way that screams they're absolutely cop cars. 3 of them pulled up outside my bar like a coordinated dance routine, parking in formation that blocked the street and probably violated about 6 traffic laws that nobody was going to ticket them for. The room held its breath, and I mean everyone, even the tourists who just wanted a quiet drink and some authentic local atmosphere, not front row seats to what was quickly becoming the most interesting Wednesday night in recent memory. The door opened, and Agent Marcus Ray walked in like someone who'd rehearsed kindness once, found it lacking, and decided to go with professional intimidation instead. He was still in that expensive suit, still had that expression that suggested he'd seen humanity at its worst, and wasn't particularly surprised anymore. Behind him came a parade of federal agents and internal affairs investigators, all wearing jackets with those big yellow letters that make it very clear they're not here to ask politely about anything. There were a lot of them, more than I'd expected, honestly. Agent Ray had brought the entire cavalry, along with what appeared to be their cousins, and maybe a few people from accounting who wanted to see what field work looked like. They filled the doorway, spread out across the bar, positioned themselves at exits like they were preparing for Raymond to suddenly develop superpowers and try to fly through the ceiling. Raymond's face went through about 17 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, anger, fear, calculation, and finally landing on something that looked like a poker player who just realized his bluff got called and his opponent has a royal flush. His hand was still on his gun, which was a spectacularly bad idea, given that he was currently outnumbered by federal agents approximately 4-1. "Detective Hale," Agent Ray said, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that doesn't need to be loud to be effective. "I'm Agent Marcus Ray, FBI. I'm going to need you to remove your hand from your weapon and place both hands where I can see them." Raymond did not do this. Instead, he reached for his badge like a man reaching for a bad joke he thinks will save him, pulling it out and holding it up like it was some kind of magical talisman that granted immunity from consequences. "I'm a police detective. There's been a misunderstanding. This man," he gestured at me with his badge, which was honestly kind of funny, "has been making false accusations, and I came here to extort him," Agent Ray interrupted smoothly. "To threaten him with fabricated evidence unless he paid you 55% of his profits. To brag about your money laundering operation involving shell companies, specifically Triborough Solutions, and your network of relatives who sign documents without asking questions. Should I continue?" Or would you like me to wait until your lawyer arrives to hear the rest? The color drained from Raymond's face so fast I was briefly concerned he might pass out right there on my freshly mopped floor. That would have been embarrassing for everyone involved. You can't, Raymond started. We have recordings, Agent Ray said calmly. Multiple recordings from multiple cameras, with timestamps and metadata. We have financial records showing wire transfers that match your described operations. We have testimony from witnesses. We have enough evidence to keep a grand jury busy for several weeks. He paused, letting that sink in. And you provided most of it yourself about 15 minutes ago, which was very helpful. Saved us a lot of paperwork. Raymond whispered. You set me up, and he was looking at me now, his expression a mixture of betrayal and grudging respect, like he was recognizing a fellow player in a game he thought only he knew how to play. I shrugged, sipping my bourbon because the situation called for casual nonchalance, and I'd been practicing. You set yourself up, I said. I just gave you a stage and let you perform. One of the federal agents, a woman who looked like she could bench press a small car and enjoyed doing paperwork in her spare time, stepped forward with handcuffs. Detective Hale, you're under arrest for extortion, conspiracy to commit money laundering, abuse of authority, and about 8 other charges that are going to be filed once we finish processing everything. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Raymond snapped, but his voice cracked slightly. The invincible detective was cracking right along with it. They cuffed him by the beer taps he'd once claimed as his perch, the ones he'd leaned against while threatening to destroy my life over money he thought he was entitled to. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. Better than the jukebox, better than the clink of glasses, better than anything. Raymond's crew. Those 6 guys in their discount leather and false bravado, scattered like napkins in a wind tunnel, trying to edge toward exits only to find federal agents blocking every possible escape route. Tree trunk neck guy made it approximately 4 steps before an agent roughly the size of a refrigerator stepped in front of him and said, "Going somewhere?" Scorpion tattoo guy actually tried to run for the back exit and made it into the hallway before discovering that 2 more agents had come in through the kitchen. The rest of Raymond's crew just froze, hands up, looking at each other like they were collectively trying to figure out whose idea this whole operation had been in the first place. Anyone else here part of Detective Hale's operation? Agent Ray asked the room at large. Now would be a good time to identify yourselves. Cooperation tends to look favorable when prosecutors are deciding who to charge with what. 3 of Raymond's crew immediately started talking, tripping over each other's words in their rush to explain that they were just following orders. They didn't know the full extent of what was happening. They had families and mortgages and really couldn't afford to go to prison for someone else's crimes. It was like watching rats desert a sinking ship, except the rats were wearing leather jackets and the ship was Raymond's entire criminal enterprise. My regulars were watching this unfold with the kind of fascination usually reserved for particularly good reality TV or highway accidents you can't look away from. Eddie had his phone out, probably texting his fantasy football league about this development. Rita was filming on Instagram Live, providing color commentary like a sports announcer. And there he goes, the corrupt cop getting what he deserves. And oh, one of his goons just tried to run and failed spectacularly. Marcus had a quiet smile on his face, the kind of smile healthcare workers get when they watch terrible people face consequences for terrible actions. Then Miriam and Tomas burst through the door with their cameras and recording equipment and the kind of journalistic excitement that probably kept them awake at night dreaming of Pulitzer Prizes. Miriam went straight for Agent Ray, already asking questions about charges and timeline, and whether this was connected to other investigations. Tomas was filming Raymond being let out in handcuffs, his camera capturing every moment of the detective's humiliation for posterity and the morning news. "Liam," Miriam called out, "can we get a statement?" "The bar is open for business," I said. "Drinks are half price for anyone who just witnessed a federal arrest." The tourists cheered. Eddie laughed. Rita updated her Instagram caption to include the drink special. Agent Ray finished supervising Raymond's arrest and walked over to me, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes suggesting he was at least mildly impressed. "That was good work, Mr. Ward. Risky but good. Is it still risky if you plan for every contingency?" "Yes," he said flatly. "Yes, it is." "Well, then I'm a risk taker." Someone should put that on my tombstone. Let's hope that's not necessary anytime soon. Ray glanced around the bar, at the cameras he now knew were there, at the regulars who were already turning this into a story they'd tell for years. You know this isn't over, right? There'll be trials, testimony, depositions. Raymond's lawyer will come after you. His friends on the force might make things difficult. I figured. And you did it anyway. He threatened my bar? I said simply. Nobody threatens my bar. Ray almost smiled. Almost. For what it's worth, you probably just helped us take down a corruption network that's been operating for at least 5 years. There are a lot of people who are going to sleep better tonight knowing Raymond Hale can't hurt them anymore. That should have felt triumphant. It should have felt like victory, like justice served with a side of vindication. And parts of it did. Watching Raymond get hauled away in handcuffs was satisfying in a way I couldn't quite articulate. But there was also something else, something heavier sitting in my chest like a stone. I felt relief, sure. But I also felt a surprising sadness for the man who used to be someone I called friend, back before he married my ex-wife and decided that badges were licenses for corruption instead of responsibility. Raymond had been a good cop once, or at least I'd thought he was. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost the plot, started believing his own hype, convinced himself that the rules didn't apply to people with enough power and connections. The bar slowly returned to normal, or whatever normal looked like after a federal arrest interrupted happy hour. The jukebox started playing again, someone having fed at quarters, and selected a song that felt appropriately dramatic. My regulars settled back into their spots, already beginning the process of turning this into legend. The tourists were definitely going to leave 5-star Yelp reviews. I poured myself another bourbon and sat down at stool 3, Sophie's old spot, and tried to figure out how I felt about everything. Victorious? Maybe. Guilty? A little. Tired? Absolutely. Ready for my life to go back to being boring? Yeah, that sounded pretty good actually. The papers ate Raymond for breakfast, and let me tell you, they didn't use silverware. They went full piranha, tearing into the story with the kind of enthusiasm journalists usually reserve for political scandals involving exotic animals or politicians caught doing something monumentally stupid on camera. By Thursday morning, Raymond Hale's face was plastered across every newspaper in the city, and not in the local hero cop saves kitten way. More like the corrupt detective gets what's coming to him, way that makes people choke on their coffee and immediately text their friends. Miriam's article hit the Metro Daily's front page above the fold, which she informed me was a big fucking deal in journalism terms. The headline read, Detective's Downfall. FBI arrests local cop in bar extortion sting, and the subheading was something about corruption networks and abuse of power. She'd written it with the kind of restrained fury that comes from months of investigating something and finally getting to publish the truth. Every paragraph was a surgical strike. Facts, quotes, documentation, all arranged in a way that made Raymond look exactly as guilty as he was. The article included details about Triborough Solutions, the shell companies, the wire transfers to Patricia Mendez, the substitute teacher, who probably had no idea her name was being used to launder money. Miriam had gotten quotes from Agent Ray about ongoing investigations into systemic corruption, which was fancy federal speak for were coming for everyone connected to this mess. She'd even included a timeline showing Raymond's rise through the police department alongside some very suspicious financial activity that didn't match his salary. The best part? She quoted me. Mr. Ward declined to comment extensively, but noted that the bar is open for business and drinks are half price for anyone who witnessed a federal arrest. It made me sound either heroic or deeply unserious, and I honestly couldn't tell which. Tomas took a different approach. His piece went up online within hours of the arrest, complete with video footage, audio recordings, and snarky captions that had way too many exclamation marks for something that was supposed to be journalism. Dirty cop gets caught in his own trap, the headline screamed, followed by, "You won't believe what he said on camera," which made it sound like a clickbait article about celebrity gossip instead of a serious investigation into police corruption. But it worked. The article went viral. Actually viral. Not just my aunt shared it on Facebook, viral, but trending on Twitter for 6 hours, viral. People were sharing the recordings of Raymond bragging about his shell companies and threatening me with fabricated evidence. Someone made a meme of Raymond's face right when he realized he was being arrested, captioned, when you realize you've played yourself. It got 40,000 likes in 3 hours. Social media did its job with the efficiency of a well-oiled outrage machine. Outraged, outraged, and then outraged with increasingly creative memes. There were TikToks about it, Instagram infographics explaining money laundering to teenagers who probably didn't care but watched anyway, Reddit threads dissecting every detail of the case with the intensity of people solving a murder mystery. Someone even made a Spotify playlist called Songs to Get Arrested To, Raymond Hale Edition, that included Bad Boys by Inner Circle, I Fought the Law by The Clash, and for some reason, All Star by Smash Mouth, which didn't really fit thematically but got included anyway because the internet has no quality control. The mayor issued a statement about how he was deeply troubled by these allegations and committed to rooting out corruption wherever it exists, which was politician speak for, "Please don't ask me how this happened under my watch." The police commissioner looked exhausted in his press conference, promising a full internal review, while probably wondering how many other cops in his department were running similar operations. My regulars started calling me the bartender who did a thing, which was possibly the lamest superhero nickname in history. Eddie introduced me to his fantasy football league buddies as the guy who took down that corrupt cop, which made me sound way cooler than I actually was. Rita told everyone on her dating apps that she personally knew the hero bartender from the news, which I discovered when 3 different guys showed up asking if I was the person from the articles and could they buy me a drink in my own bar. "You're famous," Rita announced one evening, showing me her phone where someone had created a fan account for me on Instagram. The account had posted the video of Raymond getting arrested with heart eye emojis and the caption, "Justice served hot and fresh." It had 8,000 followers. "That's deeply weird," I said. "That's modern celebrity," Rita corrected. "Embrace it. Monetize it. Start a podcast." "I'm not starting a podcast. Everyone has a podcast now. You could talk about taking down corrupt cops, give advice, interview other people who've fought the system." "Rita, I'm not starting a podcast." "Your loss. That's money on the table." But not everyone was applauding and making memes. Some people, and there's always some people, muttered that I'd crossed a line, played judge and jury, taken the law into my own hands like some kind of vigilante with a liquor license. I heard the whispers, caught the side eye from certain customers who thought what I'd done was technically legal but morally questionable, or some other philosophical bullshit that people say when they're uncomfortable with consequences happening to people they vaguely know. A guy named Paul, regular customer, always ordered IPAs and complained about them being too hoppy even though he kept ordering them, cornered me by the bar one night. "You know, what you did to Raymond was pretty messed up," he said, nursing his too hoppy IPA. "You set him up. Entrapped him." "He set himself up," I replied, which was becoming my standard response. "I just recorded him doing it." "Still, you played judge and jury. That's not your job. Neither is letting corrupt cops extort my business, but here we are." Paul frowned into his beer like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I'm just saying, man, 2 wrongs don't make a right." "No, but 1 right can stop a whole bunch of wrongs from continuing," I said. Raymond wasn't going to stop with me. There were other people, other businesses. The only reason nobody stood up to him before is because they were scared, or they didn't have evidence, or they figured it was easier to just pay up and hope he'd go away. Maybe. Paul didn't sound convinced. "Still feels like vigilante justice." "Then it's a good thing I didn't do any vigilante justice," I said patiently. "I collected evidence and turned it over to federal authorities who conducted a legal arrest based on recorded confessions of actual crimes. That's not vigilantism. That's citizenship with extra steps." Lana showed up later that week, looking slightly less exhausted than usual, which meant she was only running on 4 cups of coffee instead of her usual 7. She settled onto a stool and ordered a glass of wine that she proceeded to stare at like it had offended her ancestors. "You okay?" I asked. "I've been getting calls," she said. Other people Raymond shook down. Other businesses that paid his protection fees, or whatever he was calling them. They're coming forward now, wanting to press charges, wanting their money back, wanting justice. She took a sip of wine, which is good. Great, even. But it's also reminding me that laws are messy, and sometimes people confuse justice with spectacle. "You think I created a spectacle? I think you did what you had to do, and it worked, and now everyone's watching to see what happens next." Lana swirled her wine thoughtfully. Just be careful. The spotlight's great until it burns you. People love a hero until they decide you're not heroic enough, or you're too heroic, or you did the heroic thing wrong. So basically, I can't win. Welcome to being a human in society, Lana said dryly. We're all just stumbling around hoping we don't accidentally become the villain in someone else's story. That night, after most of the customers had cleared out and it was just me, Eddie, and a couple of late-night stragglers who were still debating whether Raymond would actually serve prison time or get off with probation and a slap on the wrist, I decided to tell a joke. It seemed appropriate. The whole situation was absurd enough that it needed some levity, even if the levity landed awkwardly. So a cop, a bartender, and a bad accountant walk into a bar. I started. Eddie looked up. Is this going where I think it's going? The cop says, I need 55% of your profits or I'll arrest you. The bartender says, I'm going to record you saying that. And the bad accountant says, can someone explain money laundering to me because I genuinely don't understand these wire transfers. There was a pause. Then Eddie laughed, not a big laugh, but enough of one to show he appreciated the effort. One of the stragglers chuckled. The other one looked confused. That's a terrible joke, Rita called from her spot by the window where she was still trying to figure out if her Tinder match was a catfish. It's a work in progress, I admitted. The city felt slightly cleaner after Raymond's arrest, like when you clean one shelf in your house and suddenly notice how dusty everything else is. The corruption wasn't gone. It never is, not really, but at least one piece of it had been removed, sent to federal holding to await trial, and probably a lengthy prison sentence. Other investigations were opening up, other cops were getting nervous, other people who'd thought they were untouchable were suddenly checking their bank records and consulting lawyers. It wasn't a complete victory. It wasn't even close to fixing everything wrong with the system. But it was something. And sometimes, something is enough. Here's what nobody tells you about being the guy who takes down a corrupt cop. You get headlines, sure, but you also get sleepless nights that stretch on like bad highway traffic with no end in sight. You get phone calls from people you haven't talked to in years, some congratulating you, some telling you you're an asshole, and some just wanting to know if the story they read online was actually true or exaggerated for clicks. You get recognized at the grocery store by strangers who either want to shake your hand or give you dirty looks while you're just trying to buy eggs and cereal like a normal human being. The first week after Raymond's arrest was fine, great, even. I was riding high on that adrenaline rush of having done something that mattered, of having stood up to a bully with a badge and won. I slept like a baby that first night, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep you get after finishing something difficult. The bar was busier than usual, full of curious people and regulars who wanted to rehash every detail of the arrest like it was a sports game we were analyzing for strategic plays. The second week was when things got complicated. I started getting calls. Not the good kind. The kind where people congratulate you and tell you you're a hero, but the uncomfortable kind where people from your past resurface like bodies in a lake and remind you that life is messy and everyone has opinions about everything you do. My cousin Jennifer called me on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., which should be illegal. She launched into a speech about family reputation and how my little stunt had made things awkward at her book club because one of the members was married to a cop, and now everyone was asking Jennifer if her cousin was anti-police or one of those activist types. I let her talk for about 4 minutes before I interrupted to remind her that I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and her opinion about my life choices ranked somewhere below what strangers think about my shoe selection. She hung up on me. I made coffee and tried not to feel guilty about it. My former construction foreman, Big Mike, called to tell me I was playing with fire and that cops have long memories and I should watch my back. This was less threatening than it sounds. Big Mike was genuinely worried. In that gruff way guys who work construction their whole lives express concern by predicting your imminent doom. I appreciated it, sort of, but it also made me realize that a lot of people expected Raymond's friends to come after me with some kind of revenge plot. They didn't, for the record. Turns out when you arrest someone with video evidence of them committing multiple felonies, their friends tend to distance themselves pretty quickly because nobody wants to be associated with the sinking ship. But the paranoia lingered. I started checking my car for tampering every morning, looking over my shoulder when I walked home at night, jumping slightly every time someone came into the bar wearing a leather jacket. Then there were the people who called to confess things. This was the weirdest category. Apparently, once you become known as the guy who took down a corrupt cop, people assume you're some kind of vigilante hotline they can call with their own stories of injustice. A woman named Martha called to tell me about a contractor who'd ripped her off 6 years ago, and could I do my thing and get her money back? A guy named Steve wanted me to investigate his ex-wife's new boyfriend who he was pretty sure was involved in something illegal, but couldn't actually articulate what. I'm a bartender. I serve drinks and listen to people's problems and occasionally take down corrupt cops when they threaten my livelihood. I'm not Batman. I don't have a cave or a signal or a butler named Alfred who helps me solve crimes. I told these people to contact actual authorities or lawyers or therapists depending on what their situation actually required. Some of them got mad. Apparently, being a hero means you're supposed to help everyone all the time forever, and declining makes you a hypocrite or something. The worst call came on a Thursday afternoon when I was restocking beer and trying to remember if I'd ordered enough limes for the weekend. My phone rang with a number I recognized immediately even though I'd deleted it from my contacts months ago. Sophie. I stared at the phone for 3 rings, debating whether answering was going to make my day better or worse. Curiosity won. It usually does. Liam, she said, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying to sound casual about something that's definitely not casual. I saw the news. About Raymond. Yeah, that happened. Are you happy? She asked, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Anger? Sadness? Confusion? All of the above mixed together like a cocktail nobody ordered? I'm tired, I said honestly. And happy sounds expensive. There was a pause. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then, you destroyed his life. He tried to destroy mine first. I just defended myself with better documentation. He's in federal custody, Liam. He's going to prison. His career is over. Everything he worked for was built on corruption and extortion. I interrupted. He wasn't some noble cop who made one mistake. He was running a whole operation, shaking down businesses across the city. The only reason you didn't know about it is because you didn't want to know. Another pause. This one felt heavier, like the weight of everything unsaid between us was pressing down on the phone line. I called to ask if you were happy, Sophie said finally, because I needed to know if this was worth it to you. If revenge tasted as good as you thought it would. It wasn't about revenge, wasn't it? She didn't sound angry anymore. Just sad. Tired. Like someone who'd just realized something disappointing about someone they used to care about. You could have just paid him, or closed the bar, or reported him without turning it into a whole operation with cameras and recordings and federal agents. But you went all in because some part of you wanted to hurt him the way you felt hurt when I left. That stung because it had just enough truth in it to be painful. Maybe, I admitted. Maybe there was some of that. But Sophie? He threatened to plant evidence on me. He threatened to destroy my business, my life, everything I'd built. So yeah, maybe I wanted him to face consequences. Maybe I wanted him to feel what it's like when someone takes everything from you. Does that make me a bad person? I don't know, Sophie said quietly. I don't know what it makes you. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I didn't mean for it to sound bitter, but it came out that way anyway. She hung up. I stood there in my stockroom surrounded by cases of beer and boxes of bar napkins, feeling like I'd just lost an argument I hadn't realized I was having. The guilt was there, had been there since the moment Raymond got cuffed, sitting in my chest like a dull stone wedged somewhere between my ribs. I'd hurt a man I used to admire, or at least a man I'd thought I admired back before I knew what he really was. Raymond and I had been friends once, in that casual way men are friends when they're married to people who are friends. We'd had beers together, watched games, made small talk about sports and weather and other safe topics that don't require emotional vulnerability. I'd taken him down, deliberately, methodically, with planning and cameras and federal agents. I destroyed his career, his reputation, probably his marriage to Sophie whenever she got around to processing what her husband actually was. And yeah, he deserved it. Legally, morally, by any reasonable standard of justice, he absolutely deserved to face consequences for what he'd done. But that didn't make it feel simple. Some people won't forgive me for what I did. Some people will call me a hero and then forget the details a week later because it's less work than staying invested. Some people will think I'm a snitch, a rat, someone who broke some unwritten code about not turning on your own. Except Raymond was never my own, and the code he followed was written in corruption and threats. I had to accept something sitting there in my stockroom having an unscheduled emotional crisis. I had hurt a man I used to know. I had taken down a life that used to be connected to mine in messy, complicated ways involving ex-wives and shared history and all those ties that don't sever cleanly. The guilt was real, and it wasn't going away just because I was technically in the right. But I also kept my bar. I kept my dignity. I kept the truth in a folder with timestamps and authentication and sent copies to people who would make sure it mattered. I proved that badges don't make you immune to consequences, that corruption doesn't pay in the long run, that sometimes the little guy wins if he plans carefully enough and documents everything and gets really lucky with his timing. And yes, I kept the joke book on the shelf, because people need to laugh when everything else is heavy, and sometimes humor is the only thing standing between you and a complete breakdown in the beer cooler. That night, Eddie found me sitting at the bar nursing a bourbon and probably looking like I was auditioning for a role in a movie about sad bartenders reflecting on their life choices. "You okay, man?" he asked, settling onto his usual stool. "Define okay. Not having an existential crisis at your own bar? Then no, I'm not okay." Eddie nodded like this made perfect sense. "You did a good thing. It doesn't always feel good when you do good things. That's why most people don't bother. Too complicated, too messy. Easier to just let bad stuff happen and pretend it's not your problem." "Thanks. That's very comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to remind you that you're not crazy for feeling weird about this." He ordered his usual beer. "You took down a corrupt cop. That's significant. But you also ruined someone's life, even if that someone was a garbage person who deserved it. Both things can be true at the same time. When did you become wise? Fantasy football teaches you about the complexity of human decision-making," Eddie said seriously. "Also, my therapist says I need to validate people's feelings more, so I'm practicing on you." I laughed despite myself. "Your therapist sounds smart." "She is. You should get one. I have bourbon and a joke book." "That's practically the same thing." "It's definitely not, but okay." A week later, the city moved on because that's what cities do. They chew through drama like a wood chipper through branches, spitting out the pieces and immediately looking for the next thing to consume. Raymond's arrest became old news, replaced by a mayoral scandal involving misappropriated funds and a reality TV star nobody had heard of doing something stupid at a nightclub downtown. The news cycle is relentless and has the attention span of a goldfish on energy drinks. The bar hummed like an old engine that finally got its oil changed. The jukebox played a happy, sad song that fit my mood perfectly, something about endings and new beginnings and other poetic nonsense that sounds profound at 2 in the morning. No one threw me a parade, which was fine because parades are loud and involve coordinating with city officials who probably still weren't thrilled about the whole exposing corruption thing. No one handed me a trophy with my name engraved, no key to the city, no official recognition beyond a few articles and some memes that would be forgotten by next Tuesday. But I sat at stool 3, Sophie's old spot, with a modest bourbon and felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but something close to it. Acceptance, maybe. The understanding that I'd done what needed doing and the consequences were what they were. Revenge wasn't a bullet or a dramatic confrontation scored by orchestral music. It was a tiny, perfectly timed phone call and a stack of authenticated files. It was proving that badges don't make you bulletproof, that corruption has an expiration date, that sometimes the little guy wins if he's stubborn enough and documents everything twice. Raymond got handcuffs and federal charges. I got sleep eventually, though it took a few weeks and maybe some therapy that Eddie's therapist recommended. The bar stayed mine. Sophie married a detective who preferred laundering money to doing his actual job, which would have been funnier if it wasn't so sad. Life is messy like that, but sometimes messy clears space for new things. I locked the door that night, walked home under streetlights that pretended they were stars, and thought, if justice has a sense of humor, it's very dry. If not, well, at least the bourbon tasted good.
While my wife was on a business trip, our kids and I decided to surprise her by flying to see her. But when we walked into her room, my wife was on the bed with her boss, kissing and cuddling. My son held my hand and what happened next makes them turn pale. We walked out without them noticing and I recorded them in the act. I sent the video to my lawyer, her boss's wife who owns 95% shares of the company. My name's Marcus Hale, I'm 42 years old, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I became the proud owner of the dumbest idea in the history of marriage. But let's rewind a bit, because every disaster story needs proper context, and this one starts on a Thursday morning that felt completely ordinary until it absolutely wasn't. Picture this, me, standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, wearing my world's okayest dad t-shirt that my kids got me as a joke 3 Christmases ago, flipping pancakes that were turning out way too crispy because I was distracted by my phone. My wife Lydia had been in Chicago for the past 2 weeks on some big corporate project with her company, and honestly, the house felt weird without her. Not bad weird, just different. Like when you rearrange furniture and keep walking into the coffee table because your muscle memory hasn't caught up yet. My daughter Ruby came bounding down the stairs with the energy of a golden retriever who just discovered tennis balls exist. She's 9 years old, gap-toothed, and has this wild curly hair that refuses to be tamed no matter how many YouTube tutorials I watch. She climbed onto the kitchen stool, swinging her legs back and forth, and hit me with the question that would change everything. Dad, when's Mommy coming home? I scraped a pancake off the griddle that looked more like a geography lesson than breakfast. Not sure, kiddo. She's still working on that big project in Chicago. You know how it is, corporate stuff, very important, very boring. Ruby wrinkled her nose in that way kids do when they're processing disappointment but trying not to show it. But she's been gone forever. I miss her bedtime stories. You do funny voices, but Mom does better sound effects. Wow, thanks for that crushing review of my parenting skills, I said, sliding the burnt pancake onto a plate. I'll be sure to work on my explosions and monster growls. That's when my son Eli trudged into the kitchen like a zombie extra from a low-budget horror film. 14 years old, headphones around his neck, phone surgically attached to his hand, and sporting that trademark teenage expression that screams, "I'm too cool to acknowledge that I live here." He grunted something that might have been morning, and collapsed into a chair without making eye contact with either of us, because apparently looking at your family is against some unwritten teenage code I wasn't aware of. "Morning, sunshine," I said, placing a slightly less burnt pancake in front of him. "Your sister was just asking about Mom." Eli grunted again, scrolling through his phone with his thumb moving at speeds that probably violated several laws of physics. I'm pretty sure he could have performed emergency surgery on that screen and not once glanced up at the actual human beings in the room. "Dude, you know eye contact is free, right?" I tried. He shrugged, which in teenage language means literally anything from, "I acknowledge your existence," to, "I'm contemplating the meaninglessness of existence itself," to, "Whatever, old man." Ruby kicked her legs harder. "Can we call Mommy? I want to tell her about my spelling test. I got 100% on Wednesday." "That's awesome, Rubes," I said, genuinely proud. "Yeah, we can try calling her later. She's probably in meetings right now." I glanced at my phone. 7:15 in the morning. Lydia would definitely be up by now, probably sipping her third coffee and reviewing spreadsheets or whatever it is that corporate consultants do before breakfast. I made a mental note to call her during my lunch break. Then, as I was pouring orange juice and trying not to think about how quiet the house had been without Lydia's laugh echoing through it, something clicked in my brain. And by clicked, I mean a spectacularly terrible idea formed with the kind of confidence that only a man who's been married for 17 years and thinks he knows everything could possess. "Hey," I said, probably grinning like an idiot. "Why don't we go surprise Mom in Chicago this weekend?" Ruby's eyes went so wide I thought they might actually pop out of her head like a cartoon character. She gasped with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested she'd just been offered a pet unicorn, a lifetime supply of ice cream, and tickets to meet her favorite pop star all at once. "Really? Really? Can we, Dad? Can we actually do that?" Eli looked up from his phone for approximately 2 seconds, which was basically the equivalent of a standing ovation in teenage communication. He shrugged and said, "Cool, I guess." My heart swelled with paternal pride. That's teenage for, "I love you, Dad, and this idea brings me joy even though I'd rather die than express genuine emotion in front of you." I'm fluent in teenager at this point. It's like learning a foreign language, except the grammar rules change every week and all the vocabulary sounds like grunting. Yeah, why not? I said, already mentally calculating if I could pull this off. We'll fly out Friday, surprise her at her hotel, have a fun weekend in Chicago. Deep dish pizza, Navy Pier, maybe that bean thing everyone takes pictures of. It'll be great. Ruby literally squealed and started bouncing on her stool so hard I worried she might achieve liftoff. This is the best day ever. Can I make a surprise sign? Can I pack my pink suitcase? Can we bring Mr. Whiskers? Mr. Whiskers is her stuffed cat, by the way. He's been to more places than most adults I know. Yes to the sign, yes to the suitcase, and Mr. Whiskers can definitely come, I said, already pulling out my laptop. Eli, you good with this? Another shrug. As long as there's Wi-Fi on the plane. And the hotel. And basically everywhere. My Snap streak can't die, Dad. People depend on me. Right, because your friends absolutely can't survive 48 hours without knowing what you had for lunch, I said, opening a travel website. Got it. Wi-Fi is priority number 1. By noon, I'd accomplished what I thought was a logistical miracle. Flights booked, 2 tickets for the kids, 1 for me, leaving Friday morning. Rental car reserved at O'Hare. Hotel rooms secured at the same place Lydia was staying, because I'd called her assistant Tracy earlier and casually asked which hotel the team was at. Tracy, bless her oblivious heart, gave me the full address and even mentioned which floor the corporate suites were on. Perfect. I sat back in my desk chair, feeling like an absolute genius. Husband of the year material right here. Lydia would open her hotel door, see us standing there, and probably cry happy tears. We'd have an amazing family weekend. The kids would remember this forever. I'd earned so many marriage brownie points I could probably skip anniversary shopping for the next 5 years. My buddy Dave from next door knocked on the door right as I was basking in my own brilliance. He's the kind of neighbor who always needs to borrow something: hedge trimmer, jumper cables, existential advice about his failing fantasy football league. Hey man, you look weirdly happy, Dave said, leaning against my doorframe. What's up? Taking the kids to surprise Lydia in Chicago this weekend, I announced proudly. Dave's eyebrows shot up. Surprise visit? That's either really romantic or really stupid. Can it be both? I laughed. He shrugged. Just saying, man. Surprise visits are a gamble. But hey, you know your wife. I'm sure it'll be fine. Famous last words. We were all set. Friday morning, we'd head to the airport. Ruby had already started packing, which included approximately 40 stuffed animals and 3 different tutus because, what if Mom wants to go somewhere fancy? Eli had packed nothing but was confident he could just wear what I have. For 3 days straight. I'd printed boarding passes, packed snacks, charged all devices, and even rehearsed what I'd say when Lydia opened the door. We were going to give Lydia the shock of her life. And trust me, she'd definitely get one. Just not even remotely close to the kind I was expecting. But that Thursday night, as I tucked Ruby into bed and she whispered, "I can't wait to see Mommy's face," I had no idea I was about to walk straight into the kind of surprise that destroys marriages, tanks careers, and becomes the single greatest mistake-turn-victory of my entire life. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need by showing you exactly what you don't. I just didn't know it yet. Friday morning hit me like a truck full of regret and optimism, which is a weird combination when you think about it. My alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, a time that should be illegal for anyone who isn't a baker or a serial killer, and I immediately questioned every life choice that had led me to this moment. But then I remembered: surprise trip to Chicago, happy wife, amazing weekend, Father of the Year trophy that definitely exists in my imagination. I dragged myself out of bed and stumbled to Ruby's room first. She was already awake, sitting on her floor surrounded by approximately 75 stuffed animals, trying to decide which ones made the cut for the trip. Her suitcase looked like a toy store had exploded inside it. "Rubes, we talked about this," I said, rubbing my eyes. You can bring 3 stuffed animals. 3. That's the rule. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes that have gotten her out of trouble since she learned to weaponize cuteness. But Dad, what if Mr. Whiskers gets lonely? He needs his friends. It's science. That's not science, that's emotional manipulation. I said, but I was already caving. Fine. 5. But that's it, and I'm counting. She squealed and started the impossible task of choosing which 5 of her stuffed friends would make the journey. I left her to it, and headed to Eli's room, where I found him still completely unconscious, face planted into his pillow, snoring like a broken lawn mower. Typical. Eli. Buddy. Rise and shine, I said, shaking his shoulder. He groaned and pulled his blanket over his head. It's still nighttime. Nighttime is for sleeping. This is child abuse. It's almost 5 in the morning, and we have a plane to catch. Move it or lose it. He sat up slowly, looking like death, warmed over and then put back in the fridge. His hair was sticking up in 17 different directions, and he had pillow lines on his face. Why did we book such an early flight? Who hurt you? Cheaper tickets, and I wanted to get there with plenty of time to surprise Mom, I explained, tossing a pair of jeans at him. Now get dressed. We leave in 30 minutes. 20 minutes later, we were loading the car in the pre-dawn darkness, and I was running on pure adrenaline and gas station coffee that tasted like regret. Ruby was bouncing around like she'd mainlined espresso, chattering nonstop about all the things she wanted to do in Chicago. Eli was moving in slow motion, looking like a zombie extra who didn't get enough makeup budget. Can we see the Big Bean, Dad? And go up the tall building? And eat pizza? And see the lake? And… Yes, all of it, I said, loading the last bag into the trunk. But first we have to actually get there, which means surviving airport security without losing our minds. I tried calling Lydia before we pulled out of the driveway. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice said, "Hi, you've reached Lydia Hale. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you." Weird. She was usually up early, especially during big work projects. I glanced at my phone, 5:15. Maybe she was in an early meeting. Or the shower. Or maybe her phone died. Yeah, that was probably it. Probably just busy, I muttered to myself, ignoring the weird little twist in my gut that felt suspiciously like intuition trying to warn me about something. But I'm a dude, and we're professionally trained to ignore our intuition until it's way too late. The drive to the airport was uneventful except for Ruby singing every Disney song ever written and Eli complaining that the car ride was murdering his sleep schedule. We parked in long-term parking, which always feels like abandoning your car in some post-apocalyptic wasteland, and made our way to the terminal. Airport security was its own special kind of hell. Ruby set off the metal detector because she'd hidden a small toy princess in her pocket. For good luck. Eli got randomly selected for additional screening and acted like he was being personally victimized by the TSA, sighing dramatically every 3 seconds. The security guy, whose name tag read Dennis, looked like he'd seen it all and was thoroughly unimpressed by my family's chaos. "Sir, is this your laptop?" Dennis asked, holding up my ancient computer that I'd forgotten to take out of my bag. "Yep, that's mine. Sorry, first time flying with kids in a while," I lied. We'd flown plenty of times, I was just frazzled. "I can tell," Dennis said in a tone that suggested he deserved a raise. By the time we made it through security, found our gate, and settled into those uncomfortable airport chairs that seem designed to punish the human spine, I was already exhausted, and we hadn't even gotten on the plane yet. I tried calling Lydia again. Voicemail. Again. That weird twist in my gut did a little flip. "Dad, can I get a snack?" Ruby asked, eyeing a nearby Hudson News like it was Disneyland. "Sure, pick something," I said, handing her a $10 bill and watching her skip off with Eli trailing behind her like a sleep-deprived bodyguard. I stared at my phone, fighting the urge to call Lydia a 3rd time. "Don't be that guy, Marcus." She's fine. She's working. She's probably in back-to-back meetings. Everything is totally normal. Our flight was called 20 minutes later, and we boarded the plane in that weird shuffle where everyone pretends they have assigned seats, but really we're all just fighting for overhead bin space like civilized animals. We settled into our row, Ruby at the window, me in the middle, because apparently I hate my knees, and Eli on the aisle so he could stretch his abnormally long legs that he'd recently grown and wouldn't shut up about. As the plane taxied down the runway, Ruby pressed her face against the window, watching the ground fall away beneath us. "This is so cool! Dad, look! We're flying! We're actually flying!" "Yes, honey, that's generally what planes do," I said, but I was smiling. Her excitement was contagious. Eli had his headphones on before we even reached cruising altitude, completely checked out from reality. I tried calling Lydia one more time before we had to switch to airplane mode. Voicemail. That gut twist was now doing full gymnastics routines. Once we hit cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Ruby pulled out a bag of embroidery thread and tiny beads from her backpack. "I'm making friendship bracelets for Mommy," she announced proudly. "One says best MOM and one says I love you and one says Ruby so she doesn't forget who made them." My heart squeezed. This kid was too pure for this world. "That's really sweet, Rubes. Mom's going to love them." The flight attendant came by with her cart, offering drinks and snacks. Ruby got apple juice. Eli took a ginger ale and a bag of peanuts, which he opened, examined with the scrutiny of a food critic, ate one, and then declared, "These taste like poverty." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What?" "Eli, they're airplane peanuts. They all taste like that." "Exactly. Poverty. Sadness. The broken dreams of better snacks," he said, dead serious, popping another one in his mouth anyway. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Brenda, was trying not to laugh. "Would you like pretzels instead, honey? Pretzels are just poverty in a different shape, but sure," Eli said, taking the pretzels. I looked at Brenda apologetically. "I don't know where he gets this from. Teenagers," she said knowingly. "I've got 3 at home." "You're doing great, Dad." The rest of the flight passed in a blur of Ruby's crafting, Eli's commentary on everything wrong with airplane food and Wi-Fi speeds, and me sitting there imagining the moment Lydia would open her hotel room door. I played it out in my head like a movie scene. She'd gasp. Her eyes would well up with happy tears. She'd hug the kids, kiss me, and tell us this was the best surprise ever. We'd order room service, watch movies together, and spend the whole weekend being the perfect family. I could see it so clearly. The joy on her face. The way she'd laugh and say, "I can't believe you guys did this." The way she'd squeeze me and whisper, "Thank you for being the best husband." Yeah. That's exactly how I thought it would go. Spoiler alert, not a single tear of joy was shed that night. But plenty of other kinds of tears would flow, along with careers, bank accounts, and one spectacularly messy marriage. As we descended into Chicago and Ruby pressed her face against the window to watch the city come into view, I felt a surge of confidence. This was going to be perfect. This surprise was going to be legendary. The universe must have been laughing its ass off at me. We landed in Chicago around 6 in the evening, which meant we hit O'Hare International Airport right at the peak of Friday rush hour chaos. If you've never experienced O'Hare during rush hour, imagine a zombie apocalypse except everyone's in business casual and fighting over Starbucks instead of brains. It's every bit as terrifying. Ruby was still vibrating with excitement as we deplaned, clutching her backpack full of friendship bracelets like they were the crown jewels. Eli was complaining that the plane Wi-Fi had been criminally slow, and he'd lost his Snapchat streak with someone named KylieXX420, which was apparently a tragedy on par with natural disasters. "Dude, you'll survive," I said, navigating us through the terminal toward baggage claim. "People existed before Snapchat streaks. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true." "Yeah, in like the 1800s when you had to send telegrams and ride horses," Eli shot back. Different times, Dad. Different times. We grabbed our luggage from the carousel. Ruby's pink suitcase covered in unicorn stickers came out first, followed by Eli's black duffel that looked like it had been through a war, and finally my navy blue roller bag that I'd owned since Ruby was born. Then we headed to the rental car shuttle, which was packed with tired travelers who all looked like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. The shuttle driver, a guy who looked about 60 with a thick Chicago accent and a Cubs cap, gave us a once-over. "You folks here for business or pleasure?" "Surprising my wife," I said proudly, like an idiot who had no idea what was coming. "Ah, that's nice," he said. "Surprises are good. Usually." That usually should have been a red flag the size of Texas, but I was too busy wrangling my kids and our luggage to pay attention to cosmic warnings delivered by shuttle drivers. The rental car place was its own special nightmare. The guy behind the counter, whose name tag said Brett, and who looked like he'd given up on life around 10 years ago, typed on his computer with the speed of continental drift. "So you've got a reservation for a mid-sized sedan," Brett said in a monotone that suggested he'd rather be doing literally anything else. "Yep, that's us," I confirmed. "Would you like to upgrade to a full-size for just $20 more per day?" "No thanks, we're good." "Insurance coverage? Roadside assistance? Premium protection package?" "I'm covered through my credit card, so we're all set." Brett looked personally offended that I'd declined his upsell attempts. "Okay. Sign here, here, and initial here. Keys are in the car. Space B47. Have a nice day." His tone suggested he hoped we'd have anything but a nice day. By the time we loaded into our rental, a silver Toyota Camry that smelled like air freshener and broken dreams, it was almost 7. Traffic out of the airport was a parking lot of misery. Ruby was asking if we were there yet every 45 seconds. Eli was complaining that the car's Bluetooth was trash, and he couldn't stream his music properly. "We literally just got in the car," I said, gripping the steering wheel as some guy in a BMW cut me off without signaling. "Give it like 5 minutes. 5 minutes in traffic is like 5 hours in real time," Eli argued. "Science. That's not science, that's just you being dramatic." The drive to the hotel took 35 minutes because Chicago traffic apparently subscribes to the philosophy that lanes are suggestions and turn signals are for quitters. I white-knuckled it through downtown, following my GPS while Ruby provided a running commentary on every building we passed, and Eli sulked in the backseat because his music kept cutting out. Finally, we pulled up to the hotel, and I had to take a moment to appreciate just how fancy this place was. The Langston Grand Chicago, because of course Lydia's company would book their executives somewhere that screamed, "We have too much money." The building was all glass and modern architecture, with a covered entrance where a valet in a burgundy uniform immediately approached our rental car like we were royalty. "Good evening, sir. Checking in?" the valet asked, and I could tell he was judging our mid-sized Toyota. Yeah," I said, suddenly feeling very out of place in my jeans and polo shirt. "I'll take care of your vehicle. Just head inside to the front desk." He handed me a ticket, and I herded my kids through the massive revolving doors into the lobby, where my jaw literally dropped. This place didn't just scream luxury, it shouted it through a megaphone while standing on a pile of gold bars. The lobby was like something out of a movie about rich people who have problems that aren't actually problems. A chandelier hung from the ceiling that was so massive and sparkly it could probably be seen from space. The thing had more crystals than a New Age bookstore and looked like it cost more than my house. The floors were polished marble, the kind of marble that's so shiny you can see your reflection and immediately question all your life choices. Leather couches that probably cost $5,000 each were arranged in tasteful clusters. There was even a piano in the corner where some guy in a tuxedo was playing jazz music like this was a fancy movie scene. I looked down at my Walmart sneakers, the ones I'd bought on sale for $29, and suddenly felt like I'd wandered onto the set of a movie I wasn't cast in. Ruby's eyes were huge. "Dad, this place is so fancy. Does Mommy really stay here?" Apparently her company has good taste, I said, approaching the front desk where a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine was typing on a computer. She had that perfect professional smile that probably took years to master, friendly but not too friendly, helpful but slightly intimidating. Her name tag read, Marissa, and her navy blue suit probably cost more than my car payment. She looked at my Walmart shoes with an expression that I can only describe as polite judgment. "Good evening, welcome to the Langston Grand. How may I help you?" Marissa's voice was smooth and professional, like a customer service robot that had been programmed with just the right amount of humanity. "Hi, yeah," I said, leaning against the marble counter that was cold enough to store meat. "My wife, Lydia Hale, is staying here. We're here to surprise her. It's a whole family thing. These are our kids." I gestured to Ruby, who waved enthusiastically, and Eli, who was on his phone. Marissa's professional smile didn't waver as she typed something into her computer. "Oh, how lovely! Let me just pull up her reservation." Click, click, click went her perfectly manicured nails on the keyboard. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Lydia Hale. Room 1112. Perfect. That's her," I said, feeling a surge of excitement. We were so close. Just had to get checked into our own rooms and then boom, surprise time. "Yes, Mrs. Hale checked in on Monday with another guest," Marissa said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I blinked. "Another guest?" "Yes, her colleague." Marissa glanced at her screen. "A Mr. Barlow. They're here with Barlow and Finch Consulting. They requested one king suite for the duration of their stay." Time did this weird thing where it simultaneously sped up and slowed down. My brain tried to process what she just said while my heart started doing uncomfortable acrobatics in my chest. "One king suite?" I repeated, my voice coming out weird. "Yes, sir. It's our executive suite on the 11th floor. Lovely views of the city." Marissa was still smiling that professional smile, completely oblivious to the fact that she just dropped a bomb on my entire existence. I forced myself to smile through what I can only describe as emotional whiplash. "All right. Must be corporate team bonding. You know how these business trips are. Lots of bonding." "Yeah. Bonding. The kind that happens horizontally in a king-size bed." Ruby tugged on my shirt. "Dad, can we go see Mommy now?" "In a minute, sweetheart," I managed, my throat suddenly dry. Marissa, bless her clueless heart, was already pulling up a new screen. "Would you like to book rooms for your stay as well? We have some lovely adjoining doubles available on the 8th floor." My brain was screaming at me. Red flags were waving so hard they were creating their own wind tunnel. But standing there in that fancy lobby with my kids looking at me with excited faces, I couldn't just fall apart. "Yeah," I heard myself say. "Let's book those rooms." As Marissa processed our reservation, I stood there smiling like everything was fine while internally my world was starting to crack at the foundations. One king suite. With her boss. For a week. Corporate team bonding, I told myself. That's totally normal. Completely innocent. There's definitely a reasonable explanation. My gut laughed bitterly at my denial. Marissa handed me 2 key cards for our rooms on the 8th floor with that same polished smile that suggested she had no idea she just detonated a nuclear bomb in my marriage. "You're all set, Mr. Hale. Rooms 814 and 816. They're adjoining, so you can open the connecting door between them. The elevators are just past the piano. Is there anything else I can help you with this evening?" "Nope, we're good," I said, my voice sounding weirdly normal despite the fact that my internal organs were currently staging a revolt. "Thanks so much for your help. Enjoy your stay at the Langston Grand," she said cheerfully, already turning her attention to the next guest in line. I grabbed our keycards and wheeled my suitcase toward the elevators, Ruby skipping alongside me and Eli dragging his feet behind us like he was being forced to march through a desert. My mind was racing at about 900 miles per hour, trying to make sense of what Marissa had just told me. One king suite. Lydia and her boss Mr. Barlow. Together. For a week. There had to be an explanation. A reasonable, logical, completely innocent explanation that didn't involve my wife of 17 years doing exactly what my gut was screaming at me she was doing. Maybe they booked it wrong. Maybe it was a mistake in the reservation system. Maybe King Suite meant something different in corporate hotel language. Maybe Mr. Barlow was actually sleeping on the couch, and they were just sharing a suite because it was more cost-effective. Yeah, that made sense. Companies love saving money. This was probably just some budget-conscious decision that sounded way worse than it actually was. My gut called me an idiot. Dad, this hotel is so cool. Ruby was practically spinning in circles as we walked through the lobby. Do you think our rooms have those fancy chocolates on the pillows? Sophia from school went to a fancy hotel once, and she said they had mints that were shaped like swans. I don't know about swan mints, but I bet there's something nice, I said, pressing the elevator call button with more force than necessary. Eli looked up from his phone for half a second. Are we going to see Mom tonight or tomorrow? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Tonight, I said, watching the elevator numbers descend. We'll drop our stuff in the rooms, and then we'll go surprise her. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open with that smooth, expensive sound that fancy hotel elevators make. We stepped inside, and I pressed the button for the 8th floor. Ruby immediately started making faces at herself in the mirrored walls. Eli leaned against the corner, scrolling through his phone with his thumbs moving at superhuman speed. And me? I stood there watching the floor numbers light up, one by one, while my brain went into full-scale panic mode. What if there wasn't an innocent explanation? What if my gut was right? What if I walked up to room 1112 and discovered that my wife was actually… No, I couldn't even let myself finish that thought. Not yet. Not until I knew for sure. But what if I did know for sure? What would I do? Burst in screaming? Cry? Throw punches like some dramatic TV show? Stand there silently and let my heart break into a million pieces while my kids watched? The elevator chimed for the 8th floor, and the doors opened into a hallway that was decorated in that modern hotel style: geometric carpet, dim mood lighting, abstract art on the walls that probably cost thousands of dollars despite looking like something a kindergartner could make. This way, I said, checking the room numbers. 814 and 816 were at the end of the hall, around a corner. I unlocked 814 first, a double room with 2 queen beds, a flat-screen TV that was bigger than the one in my living room at home, and a window overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights were starting to twinkle against the darkening sky. I call the bed by the window, Ruby announced, immediately launching herself onto the mattress and bouncing like it was a trampoline. Careful, Rubes, hotels charge you if you break stuff, I said, setting down my suitcase. I opened the adjoining door and unlocked 816 for Eli, which was basically identical to the first room. You good in here, bud? Eli walked in, glanced around with the enthusiasm of someone being shown a dentist's office, and shrugged. It's fine. Wi-Fi password? Should be on that card by the TV. Cool. He immediately flopped onto one of the beds and returned his full attention to his phone. I stood in the doorway between the 2 rooms, my hand still on the doorknob, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to unpack, order room service, watch TV with the kids, and pretend that everything was totally normal. Maybe wait until tomorrow morning to surprise Lydia, after I'd had a full night's sleep and could think more clearly. But the other part of me, the part that had been listening to that gut feeling twist and turn and scream warnings for the past hour, knew that I couldn't wait. I had to know. Right now. Tonight. Okay guys, I'm going to head up to Mom's room really quick, I said, trying to sound casual. Just going to check if she's there and if it's a good time for the surprise. Ruby popped up from where she'd been testing the bed's bounce capacity. Can I come? I want to see her face. Not yet, sweetheart. Let Daddy scout it out first, make sure she's not in a meeting or anything. You know how work trips are, lots of boring adult stuff. She pouted but accepted this explanation. Okay, but come back and get us as soon as she's ready. I want to give her the bracelets. I will, I promise. I looked over at Eli. You're in charge while I'm gone. Don't let your sister jump on the beds too much. Eli gave me a thumbs up without looking away from his screen. Got it. Bed jumping supervision is my specialty. I stepped back into my room, closed the adjoining door most of the way, and stood there for a moment just breathing. My hands were shaking slightly. My heart was doing that thing where it beats too fast, and you become weirdly aware of your own pulse. My mouth felt dry despite the fact that I'd been drinking water all day. This was it. The moment of truth. I was about to go upstairs to room 1112 and either confirm my worst fears or discover that I was a paranoid idiot who'd worked himself into a panic over nothing. I walked to the regular elevator and pressed the call button. The doors opened almost immediately, like the universe was saying, "Yeah, let's get this show on the road." I stepped inside and pressed 11. The doors slid shut, sealing me in with my own thoughts and that stupid smooth jazz playing through the elevator speakers. Who picks the music for hotel elevators? And why is it always the kind of jazz that makes you feel like you're in a noir film where everyone's about to make terrible decisions? As the elevator climbed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked tired. Stressed. Like a man who was about to have his entire world flipped upside down and shaken until everything fell out. Maybe it's nothing, I said to my reflection. My reflection looked back at me like, "Dude, you know it's not nothing." The elevator chimed for the 9th floor. Then 10th. My palms were actually sweating now, which was ridiculous because I was 42 years old, not some teenager about to ask someone to prom. But my body apparently didn't care about logic or age-appropriate anxiety levels. 11th floor. The doors opened. I stepped out into another geometric carpeted hallway, this one quieter than the 8th floor. Executive suites, Marissa had said. Fewer rooms, more space, more privacy. Perfect for people who wanted to do things they shouldn't be doing without nosy hotel guests wandering past. Room numbers were marked on little brass plaques on the wall. 1101 to 1108 to the left, 1109 to 1116 to the right. I turned right, my feet moving forward even though every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, get back in that elevator, go back to my kids, order pizza, and pretend this whole trip had never happened. But I couldn't. I had to know. And there it was. 1112. A plain hotel room door that looked exactly like every other door in this hallway, except this one was hiding either my wife doing completely normal work stuff or my wife destroying our entire marriage. I stood there staring at that door like it might suddenly develop a window so I could peek inside without having to actually confront whatever was happening on the other side. My hand reached for the door handle, then dropped back to my side. Then reached again. Then dropped again. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "Just knock. It's your wife. You're allowed to knock on your wife's door." I raised my hand to knock, then paused. What if she was on a work call? What if I interrupted something important and embarrassed her in front of her colleagues? What if... No. Stop. Knock on the damn door. I knocked. 3 solid raps that sounded way too loud in the quiet hallway. Nothing. I waited, listening. Was that movement inside? Music? I couldn't tell. The hotel rooms were probably soundproofed really well. Rich people don't like hearing other rich people doing rich people things. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. But I definitely heard something. Movement. Maybe shuffling. Was that laughter? A man's laugh? My heart dropped into my stomach and then kept falling until it hit my feet. That weird gut twist had now evolved into full-body alarm bells. I tried the door handle. Locked, obviously. Of course it was locked. I stood there like an idiot, hand on a locked door handle, trying to decide what to do next. I could call her. But if she was in there with her boss and they were actually doing something inappropriate, she'd just not answer. Or worse, answer and lie about where she was. I could walk away. Go back downstairs, grab the kids, check out of the hotel, fly home, and pretend this never happened. live in blissful ignorance until what? Until I couldn't ignore it anymore? Then I remembered. Marissa at the front desk. I told her we were surprising Lydia. I could go back down there, explain that my wife wasn't answering the door, ask if they could give me a spare keycard. It was my wife's room, after all. Technically. Sort of. But before I could talk myself out of it or convince myself I was overreacting, I heard it clearly this time: laughter. Definitely laughter. A man's deep chuckle followed by a woman's giggle that I would recognize anywhere because I'd been hearing it for 17 years. Lydia's laugh. My wife was in that room, laughing with another man, in a king's suite they were sharing, at 7:30 on a Friday night. I stood there frozen, my hand still on the door handle, and that's when I heard something else. Music. Smooth jazz. The romantic kind. The kind people play when they want to set a mood. And that's when I knew. I didn't need to see inside that room. I didn't need to open that door. My gut had been right all along, screaming at me since Marissa had mentioned one king's suite, and I'd been too stupid or too scared to listen. But now I was listening. And I was going back downstairs to that front desk, and I was getting a key card to that room, and I was going to see for myself exactly what my wife and Mr. Barlow were bonding over. Because if I was wrong, I'd apologize and we'd laugh about it later. And if I was right? Well, then this surprise trip was about to become a whole different kind of surprise. I took the elevator back down to the lobby with my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The smooth jazz playing through the speakers now sounded like a soundtrack to my impending mental breakdown. Some saxophone was wailing away like it knew exactly what kind of evening I was about to have, and honestly, screw that saxophone. The lobby was busier now, people checking in, heading out to dinner, living their normal lives where their spouses weren't currently betraying them 11 floors above. I approached the front desk where Marissa was still stationed, still looking professionally perfect, still completely oblivious to the fact that she'd already ruined my life once tonight. "Hi again," I said, and my voice sounded weirdly steady considering my insides felt like they'd been thrown in a blender. "Sorry to bother you, but I went up to my wife's room and she's not answering. I think she might be asleep or in the shower or something. Is there any way I could get a spare key card? I'd love to surprise her." Marissa's professional smile flickered for just a second. "Oh, well, normally we can't give out key cards to rooms that aren't under your name for security reasons." "I totally understand," I said, and then I did something I'm not proud of, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I pulled out my wallet and showed her my driver's license. "Look, same last name. Marcus Hale, Lydia Hale. We're married. These are our kids." I gestured vaguely in the direction where I'd left Ruby and Eli upstairs. "I flew all the way from home to surprise her. It's our anniversary weekend." That was a complete lie. Our anniversary was in March. But Marissa didn't know that. She hesitated, looking at my license, then at her computer screen, then back at me. I could see her doing the mental calculation of whether helping me was worth potentially breaking hotel policy. "Please," I added, and I must have looked pathetic enough because she sighed. "Okay, but just this once. And technically I'm not supposed to do this." She typed something into her computer, swiped a blank key card through the machine, and handed it to me. "Room 1112. I hope your wife loves the surprise." "Oh, she's going to be surprised all right," I said, taking the key card. "Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver." If she only knew. I rode the elevator back up to 11, and this time I didn't hesitate in the hallway. I walked straight to room 1112 with the key card clutched in my hand like it was a weapon. My brain had gone into this weird autopilot mode where I wasn't really thinking anymore, just moving forward on pure momentum, and what I can only describe as morbid curiosity mixed with rage. I stood outside the door one more time. Last chance to turn back. Last chance to preserve whatever was left of my ignorance and my marriage. Last chance to not see whatever was happening on the other side of this door. I swiped the key card. The lock clicked green. I pushed the door open just a crack, maybe 6 inches, just enough to see inside without fully entering, and that's when my entire world collapsed into a bad movie scene that I couldn't pause or rewind or walk out of. The suite was fancy, of course. Executive-level fancy. I could see a living area with a couch, a mini bar, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Chicago skyline. Mood lighting that was definitely dimmed for romantic purposes. A bottle of wine on the coffee table. 2 glasses. Smooth jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker. And there, through the open bedroom doorway, on what was very clearly a king-size bed with high thread count sheets that probably cost more than my car payment, was my wife. Lydia. My wife of 17 years. The woman I'd married in a small ceremony at her parents' backyard. The woman who'd held my hand through 2 difficult pregnancies. The woman who knew I liked my coffee with 2 sugars and always bought the creamer I preferred even though she thought it was too sweet. The woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, for better or worse, till death do us part. She was in bed with a man who was definitely not me. Mr. Barlow, I presumed. Her boss. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, wearing an expensive-looking dress shirt that was unbuttoned halfway down. He had his arm around her. They were cuddling. Actually cuddling like some rom-com couple having a perfect evening together. Lydia was wearing a silk robe. Burgundy, which I knew for a fact I'd never seen before, which meant she'd bought it specifically for this trip, and she was laughing at something he just said. Her head was on his shoulder. Her hand was on his chest. They looked comfortable. Familiar. Like this wasn't the first time they'd done this. They were kissing. Not like a peck. Like a full-on, romantic, passionate kiss that made my stomach turn inside out. She made this little giggle sound that I recognized because that's the sound she used to make when we first started dating, back when everything was new and exciting. It wasn't just betrayal, it was grossly cinematic. Like someone had written a script for husband catches wife cheating, and cast the most cliché actors possible. There was wine. There was jazz music. There was mood lighting. The man even had his dress socks draped over the lamp like some pretentious film school student's idea of romance. His socks. On the lamp. Who does that? What kind of monster puts their socks on a lamp? I stood there frozen in the doorway, staring at this scene that was simultaneously destroying my marriage and offending my basic sense of interior decorating, and I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This was real. This was actually happening. My wife was cheating on me. In a fancy hotel. With her boss. With terrible sock placement. I don't know how long I stood there. Probably only seconds, but it felt like hours. Before I heard a small voice behind me. Dad? I turned around and my heart, which I thought couldn't possibly break any more than it already had, shattered into approximately 10 million more pieces. Eli was standing in the hallway, looking confused. He must have followed me up because he was worried or bored or just being a nosy teenager. His eyes moved from me to the crack in the door, and I saw the exact moment he processed what he was seeing. His face went through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, realization, shock, hurt, anger. Dad, he said again, quieter this time. Is she? He couldn't finish the sentence. Neither could I. Yeah, buddy. I managed to say, my throat feeling like I'd swallowed broken glass. Yeah, she is. He walked up beside me, and we both stood there looking through that 6-inch crack in the door at the woman who was supposed to be the center of our family, watching her be intimate with someone who wasn't her husband, wasn't the father of her children, wasn't part of our family at all. Eli's voice was small and broken when he spoke. Is Mom wrestling? Under any other circumstances, I would have laughed at that. The innocent question of a kid trying to make sense of something his brain couldn't quite process. But right now, standing in this hallway watching my marriage end in real time, I couldn't laugh. Yeah, buddy, I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. Emotional wrestling. And it looks like she's losing. He leaned into me slightly, and I felt him squeeze my hand. That small gesture, My teenage son who never showed physical affection, who thought hugs were uncool and emotions were for kids, holding my hand in a hotel hallway while we watched his mother destroy our family. That broke me in a way that seeing Lydia with another man hadn't quite managed. But here's the thing about being broken: sometimes it clears your head. Sometimes it burns away all the confusion and doubt and replaces it with crystal clear purpose. I pulled out my phone with my free hand, careful not to let go of Eli, and I opened the camera. My hands were surprisingly steady. I pressed record. Through the crack in the door, I captured 15 seconds of footage. Lydia and Mr. Barlow kissing. Cuddling. Her laughing at something he said. His hand on her waist. Her hand on his face. The wine glasses. The mood lighting. The stupid socks on the lamp. 15 seconds of evidence that would change everything. I stopped recording and looked at the video. Crystal clear. Well lit. No question about what was happening. It was perfect in the worst possible way. Eli was still standing next to me, still holding my hand, staring at the floor now like he couldn't bear to look at that door anymore. "Come on, bud," I said quietly, backing away from the door and letting it click shut. "Let's go back to the room." "Are you going to tell her we saw?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But don't worry. She'll find out soon enough that this little romantic getaway is about to become very, very expensive." We walked back to the elevator in silence. Eli still hadn't let go of my hand. As we rode down to the 8th floor, I looked at the video one more time, and something shifted inside me. I wasn't broken anymore. I was angry. Focused. Determined. I opened my text messages and found my lawyer's number. Richard Chen. We'd used him for our wills a few years back, and I'd kept his contact info. I attached the video and typed out a message. "Richard, it's Marcus Hale. Need to discuss divorce proceedings ASAP. Evidence attached. Also, wife's boss is involved. His wife might want to see this too. Do you happen to know Mrs. Cassandra Barlow?" I hit send. Then we went back to the room where Ruby was still making friendship bracelets for a mother who didn't deserve them. Back in room 814, Ruby was sitting cross-legged on her bed surrounded by what looked like a craft store explosion. Embroidery thread in every color imaginable, little plastic beads scattered across the comforter, and approximately 7 friendship bracelets in various stages of completion. She looked up when we walked in, her face lighting up like Christmas morning. "Did you see Mommy? Is she ready for the surprise?" She bounced excitedly, holding up a bracelet that said Best MOM, in purple and pink beads. I looked at that bracelet. At those carefully chosen beads, at the crooked letters that she'd spent an hour making perfect, at the pure love and excitement radiating from my 9-year-old daughter who had no idea that her mother was currently upstairs ruining our family, and I had to swallow hard before I could speak. "Mommy's busy right now, sweetheart," I said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. My voice sounded weirdly normal, like I was commenting on the weather instead of processing the complete implosion of my marriage. "She's got some work stuff to handle." "But it's nighttime," Ruby protested. "Who works at nighttime?" "Adults with terrible priorities," Eli muttered from the doorway before disappearing into his own room through the adjoining door. Ruby looked confused but accepted this explanation with the blind trust that kids have before life teaches them that adults are actually just tall children who lie better. "Okay. Can we surprise her tomorrow morning then? I want to give her the bracelets at breakfast. Can we get pancakes? This hotel probably has really good pancakes." "Yeah, Rubes. We'll figure it out tomorrow." I ruffled her hair, fighting the urge to pull her into a hug and never let go. "Why don't you get ready for bed? It's been a long day." "But Dad, it's only like 8 o'clock, she argued, because apparently bedtime enforcement knows no vacation. "Fine, you can stay up until 9. Watch some TV, finish your bracelets, whatever you want. Just brush your teeth and put on pajamas, okay?" She nodded enthusiastically and went back to her crafting, already humming some pop song I didn't recognize while stringing beads. I watched her for a moment, This kid who was too innocent and pure for the ugly reality that was about to crash into our lives like a freight train, and I wanted to keep her in this bubble forever where the biggest problem was choosing between purple and pink beads. I walked through the adjoining door into Eli's room. He was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling, phone face down on his chest. Not scrolling, not texting, not Snapchatting. Just staring. That's how I knew he was really messed up. When a 14-year-old voluntarily puts down his phone, you know something's seriously wrong. "Hey," I said, sitting down on the other bed. "You okay?" Stupid question. Of course he wasn't okay. Neither was I. "But what else do you say?" "Is it my fault?" he asked quietly, still not looking at me. "Like, did Mom do this because I'm a pain in the ass or because I don't talk to her enough or—" "Stop." I cut him off immediately. "Eli, look at me." He turned his head. His eyes were red. "This is not your fault. Not even a little bit. Not even 0.001%. What Mom did has nothing to do with you or Ruby or anything either of you did or didn't do. This is on her and her terrible choices. You understand me?" He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe it. That's the thing about betrayal. It makes everyone question themselves, even when they did nothing wrong. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "Honestly? I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "But I promise you, whatever happens, you and Ruby are going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. It might take a while, and it's going to suck for a bit, but we'll get through it. Are you going to tell her we saw?" I thought about that. Part of me wanted to march back up to room 1112 right now and kick the door open like some action movie hero and scream at both of them until my voice gave out. Part of me wanted to drag Ruby upstairs and make Lydia explain to her 9-year-old daughter why Mommy was in bed with someone who wasn't Daddy. Part of me wanted to set Mr. Barlow's stupid socks on fire while they were still on the lamp. But the smarter part of me, the part that was already thinking 3 moves ahead like this was some twisted chess game, knew that staying calm and strategic was going to hurt Lydia and her boss way more than any dramatic confrontation could. "Not yet," I said. "But trust me, she's going to find out real soon that her little Chicago adventure just became very, very expensive." My phone buzzed. Text message from Richard Chen, my lawyer. That was fast. I'd only sent him the video like 10 minutes ago. "Marcus. Just watched the video. Holy hell. This is pretty clear-cut evidence of adultery. In a divorce case, this could work heavily in your favor, especially regarding custody and asset division. Also, and this is interesting, I do know Cassandra Barlow. Professionally. We've worked on some business contracts together. She owns 95% of Barlow and Finch Consulting. Her husband is essentially an employee with a fancy title. If she finds out about this, Barlow's career is over. Should I reach out to her?" I stared at that text for a solid 30 seconds. Cassandra Barlow owned 95% of the company. The company where Lydia worked. The company that was currently paying for this romantic king's suite getaway. I texted back. "Yes. Send her the video. She deserves to know what her husband's doing in hotels on her dime." Richard responded immediately. "On it. She's going to be furious. This is going to get messy. Can you meet tomorrow to discuss strategy? Say 10 a.m. at the coffee shop across from the hotel? I'll be there. One more thing, don't confront your wife yet. Let me handle the legal side first. Document everything, but don't engage. I know it's hard, but trust me. No problem. I'm keeping my distance." I set my phone down and leaned back against the headboard. Eli was watching me carefully. "What did your lawyer say?" he asked. "He said we're going to be fine," I told him. "And that Mom's boss is about to have a really, really bad day." My phone buzzed again. Unknown number this time. "Mr. Hale, this is Cassandra Barlow. Richard Chen just sent me your video. I've watched it 3 times. Each viewing makes me angrier. I need to meet you tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. The Intelligentsia Coffee on Randolph Street. Don't tell anyone, especially not your wife or my soon-to-be ex-husband. We need to talk strategy before I burn his entire world down. See you then. CB. I showed the text to Eli, whose eyes went wide. Dude, his wife sounds terrifying, he said. Good, I replied. Lydia's about to learn that you don't mess with other people's marriages without consequences. And Mr. Barlow's about to learn that you definitely don't cheat on a woman who owns 95% of your company. I texted Cassandra back. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. Then I texted Richard. Cassandra wants to meet at 9. You still good for 10? Perfect. I'll come by after your meeting with her. This is going to be one hell of a weekend. Sorry you're going through this, but legally speaking, you're in a strong position. Hang in there. I looked over at Eli, who was processing everything with that intense teenage expression that's half confusion, half trying to be mature about it. What are you going to tell Ruby? He asked. Nothing yet, I said. She doesn't need to know the details. As far as she's concerned, we're having a nice weekend in Chicago and Mom's busy with work. We'll figure out the rest later. She's going to be really sad. I know. My throat got tight. But we'll help her through it. That's what families do. Even broken ones? Especially broken ones. We sat there in silence for a minute, just being sad together, and honestly that was more bonding than any surprise trip could have ever accomplished. Sometimes the worst moments bring people closer than the best ones ever could. Ruby's voice came through the adjoining door. Daddy, can we order room service? I want French fries. I looked at Eli. French fries sound good to you. Yeah, he said. And maybe a burger. Emotional trauma makes me hungry. That's the spirit, I said, grabbing the room service menu from the desk. Let's order enough food to feed a small army. Tonight we eat our feelings. Tomorrow we watch careers burn. I walked back into Ruby's room, where she'd finished another bracelet and was testing it on her wrist. She smiled up at me, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb that was about to detonate in our family. Did you decide about breakfast with Mommy? She asked. I smiled, even though it hurt. Sweetheart, I have a feeling Mommy's going to be too busy for breakfast tomorrow. She's got some very important meetings coming up. The kind that change your whole life. Oh, Ruby said, disappointed but accepting. Well, can we still get pancakes without her? Absolutely, I said. Best pancakes in Chicago, just you, me, and Eli. It'll be perfect. And it would be. Because while Lydia was upstairs making the worst decisions of her life, I was down here with our kids, ordering room service, and setting up dominoes that were about to fall in spectacular fashion. My phone buzzed one more time. Cassandra Barlow again. By the way, I'm filing for divorce Monday morning. I'm also terminating my husband's employment. Effective immediately. Your wife will be let go as well for violation of company ethics policy. Thank you for the evidence. You did me a favor. Sleep well, Mr. Hale. Tomorrow we make them regret everything. I smiled for real this time. Oh, I'll sleep just fine, Mrs. Barlow. I texted back. Sweet dreams. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stupid burgundy robe and those socks on the lamp, and my brain would jolt me awake like it was trying to protect me from nightmares that had already come true. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely and just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Ruby's soft snoring from the other bed and mentally preparing myself for my 9 o'clock meeting with Cassandra Barlow. By 8:15, I was showered, dressed, and drinking the world's saddest hotel room coffee from one of those tiny pots that makes approximately 3 sips of coffee-flavored disappointment. Ruby was still asleep, curled up with Mr. Whiskers and about 4 other stuffed animals. Eli was awake in his room. I could hear him moving around. But he hadn't come through the adjoining door yet, which meant he was probably dealing with his own emotional crisis in typical teenage fashion, silently and alone. I knocked softly on his door. Hey bud, I'm heading out for a meeting. You good to watch Ruby for an hour? The door opened. Eli looked like he'd slept about as well as I had, which is to say not at all. Yeah, I got her. Are you meeting with that lady? The boss's wife? Yep. Cassandra Barlow. She's going to help me figure out next steps. Tell her to destroy him, Eli said with surprising venom for someone who usually couldn't be bothered to have strong opinions about anything except Wi-Fi speeds. Oh, I have a feeling she's already got that covered, I said. Order room service for breakfast if Ruby wakes up. Get whatever you guys want. I'll be back in an hour. The Intelligentsia Coffee on Randolph Street was a 10-minute walk from the hotel, and I was grateful for the cold Chicago morning air that helped clear my head. The city was already buzzing with Saturday morning activity, tourists taking photos, locals walking dogs, joggers who apparently enjoyed suffering voluntarily. I walked past all of them feeling like I was in some alternate dimension where everyone else got to have normal lives while mine was currently being dismantled piece by piece. The coffee shop was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, and baristas who looked like they judge you for ordering anything with more than 2 syllables. I spotted Cassandra Barlow immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, looking exactly like someone who owned 95% of a consulting firm, and wasn't afraid to use that power. Mid-40s, perfectly styled dark hair, wearing a black blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and red lipstick so sharp it could probably cut through steel. She had her laptop open and was typing furiously, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the kind of precision that suggested she was either writing very important emails or planning someone's professional destruction. Possibly both. She looked up when I approached, and her smile was the kind that didn't reach her eyes, the smile of someone who was polite by training but furious by circumstance. Mr. Hale, she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike, the handshake of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms establishing dominance. Thank you for meeting me. Please sit. I sat down across from her, feeling suddenly very aware that I was wearing a polo shirt from Target, and she looked like she'd stepped out of a Fortune 500 magazine spread. Coffee? She asked. I took the liberty of ordering you an Americano. Richard mentioned you were a straight coffee person. No fancy drinks. That's perfect, thank you, I said, genuinely impressed that she'd bothered to find out. A barista with a man bun and impressive tattoo sleeves brought over 2 coffees, mine and what looked like a cappuccino for Cassandra. He set them down with that careful precision that baristas use when they've made coffee into an art form, then retreated back behind the counter. Cassandra took a sip of her cappuccino, maintaining eye contact the entire time. It was slightly intimidating, like being evaluated by someone who could see through all your bullshit and was already 3 steps ahead of you. So, she said, setting down her cup, I watched your video approximately 7 times last night. Each viewing made me progressively angrier, which is quite an achievement considering I started at rage level 10. By the 7th viewing, I'd invented new levels of fury that don't have names yet. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Yeah, it's not exactly the kind of content you want to watch on repeat. My husband, she said, and the way she emphasized husband made it sound like a curse word, is a special kind of stupid. Cheating on me is one thing, men are predictable creatures when their egos get involved. But doing it with a subordinate employee in a hotel room that the company is paying for, during a business trip that I personally approved? That's not just cheating. That's professional suicide wrapped in arrogance and tied with a bow of catastrophic stupidity. Your husband's sock placement didn't help his case either, I said. Who puts socks on a lamp? That's just offensive interior decorating. Cassandra's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. I noticed that detail. It's very on brand for Kenneth, actually. He's always had terrible taste. I should have known from the moment he suggested we hang inspirational posters in the office bathrooms. We sat there for a moment, 2 betrayed spouses bonding over our terrible partner's terrible choices, and honestly it was weirdly therapeutic. Here's what I need from you, Cassandra said, pulling out her phone. Send me the full video. The complete 15 seconds. I want it in the highest resolution possible. I'm forwarding it to my lawyer, my accountant, and the head of HR at Barlow and Finch. By noon today, Kenneth will be terminated for breach of ethics, violation of company policy, and gross misconduct. Your wife will be terminated as well for the same reasons. I pulled out my phone and airdropped her the video. Her phone buzzed with the notification. Thank you, she said, watching it one more time with her jaw getting progressively tighter. My company. My reputation. My money paying for this disgusting little affair. And Kenneth actually thought I wouldn't find out. The man is delusional. What about assets? I asked. Assuming you guys are married, he must have some claim to. Prenup. Cassandra cut me off. Ironclad. Written by the best divorce lawyers in Chicago. Kenneth gets exactly what he came into the marriage with, which was approximately $47,000 in student loan debt and an inflated sense of his own importance. Everything else is mine. The company, the house in Lincoln Park, the vacation home in Aspen, the investment portfolio, mine, and mine. That's beautiful, I said sincerely. Isn't it? She smiled that sharp smile again. I'm also freezing his credit cards, his company accounts, and his access to any shared resources. As of approximately 10 minutes ago, Kenneth Barlow is effectively unemployed and broke. My phone buzzed. Text from Richard Chin. Just got the video from Cassandra. She's terrifying and I love it. See you at 10. By the way, she's already started the termination paperwork. Your wife will know by lunch. I showed the text to Cassandra, who nodded approvingly. Richard's one of the best lawyers in Chicago. You're in good hands. Now about your wife. Lydia. I supplied. Lydia. She repeated, testing the name like it tasted bad. She's been with Barlow and Finch for how long? 3 years. She started as a senior consultant and worked her way up to project manager. Cassandra typed something into her laptop. Right. I'm looking at her employee file now. Strong performance reviews, good client feedback, apparently excellent at building relationships. She paused meaningfully on that last part. Unfortunately, building relationships with married executives is a violation of our ethics policy, specifically Section 4.2, which prohibits romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and their direct reports. It's grounds for immediate termination without severance. So she gets nothing? Correct. No severance package, no references, no exit benefits. Just a termination letter in her company email and a notation in her file that she was let go for ethical violations. That tends to make finding new employment rather difficult in the consulting world. I should have felt bad about that. Should have felt some sympathy for the woman I'd been married to for 17 years, the mother of my children, watching her career implode. But honestly, I felt nothing except a grim satisfaction that her choices were finally catching up to her. Oh, don't thank me, I said when Cassandra started to speak. Just make sure Lydia updates her LinkedIn soon. She's going to need a new job description. Cassandra actually laughed at that, a real laugh, not the polite corporate one. I like you, Marcus. You're handling this with remarkable composure. Most men would be crying or breaking things or trying to fight my husband in a parking lot. Trust me, the night's still young, I said. But I've got 2 kids who need me to keep it together, and falling apart isn't going to help anyone. Besides, watching you dismantle both of their careers is way more satisfying than anything I could do. She raised her cappuccino cup. To revenge served cold and professionally. I clinked my Americano against it. And to terrible spouses who are about to have very bad days. 2 hours later, after my meeting with Richard Chin, who walked me through divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, and asset division, Cassandra's promised email bomb detonated across Barlow and Finch Consulting's entire staff. My phone buzzed with a forwarded email from Richard. Subject line: Important personnel changes. The email was from Cassandra herself, sent to every employee. Effective immediately, Kenneth Barlow and Lydia Hale have been terminated from Barlow and Finch Consulting for violations of Company Ethics Policy Section 4.2. Any questions should be directed to HR. Professional conduct is not optional at this firm. Short. Professional. Absolutely devastating. I imagined Lydia opening that email in her fancy king's suite, probably still in that burgundy robe, maybe having breakfast with Kenneth while they congratulated themselves on how clever they were. Reading those words, realizing that her career, her reputation, and her income had just evaporated because she couldn't keep her hands to herself. My phone started ringing. Lydia. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Text message. Marcus, what did you do? I didn't respond. Another text. Call me right now. Nope. And another. This is your fault. I finally replied. Actually, pretty sure sleeping with your married boss is your fault. I just made sure the right people found out. Have a great weekend. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Then I blocked her number and went back to the hotel, where my kids were waiting. How'd it go? Eli asked when I walked in. Your mom just got fired, I said. So did her boss. Want to go get deep dish pizza? Ruby looked up from her coloring book. Can we see the Big Bean? Absolutely, I said. And Navy Pier. And whatever else you want. Today we're tourists. Because nothing says emotional recovery quite like deep dish pizza and a Ferris wheel. The rest of Saturday was actually pretty great, which felt weird considering my marriage was actively imploding somewhere 11 floors above us. But I'd made a decision that morning. I wasn't going to let Lydia's catastrophic life choices ruin this weekend for my kids. They deserve better than watching their dad spiral into depression while their mom dealt with the consequences of her actions. So we went full tourist mode. We hit Millennium Park and took approximately 400 photos of Ruby making faces at Cloud Gate, the giant reflective bean sculpture that's basically Chicago's version of asking, "You seeing this shit?" We rode the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier, where Eli actually put down his phone for 10 whole minutes to enjoy the view. We ate deep dish pizza at Lou Malnati's that was so good I momentarily forgot that my wife was a cheater, and my life was falling apart. Ruby was having the time of her life, completely oblivious to the drama. She collected postcards from every tourist shop we passed, bought a stuffed animal of the Chicago flag from a street vendor, and insisted on getting matching "I Heart Chicago" t-shirts for everyone, including Mommy when we see her later. That one hurt, but I bought the shirt anyway. Eli was quieter than usual, but every so often he'd catch my eye and give me this little nod that said, "I got you, Dad." Kid was being mature beyond his years, which made me both proud and sad because 14-year-olds shouldn't have to be the emotional support system for their parents. My phone had been going absolutely nuclear all day. I'd put it on silent after that exchange with Lydia, but I could see the notifications piling up every time I checked the time. By the time we got back to the hotel around 6 in the evening, I had 47 missed calls from Lydia. 23 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, probably Barlow. 8 missed calls from Lydia's mother, Patricia, who I called Hurricane Patricia, behind her back because she had the uncanny ability to make every situation more dramatic. 67 text messages. 12 voicemails. It was like Christmas morning, except instead of presents it was desperate people realizing their actions had consequences. We got back to our rooms and Ruby immediately collapsed on her bed with her new stuffed Chicago flag. "That was the best day ever! Can we go to the aquarium tomorrow?" "Sure thing, kiddo," I said, even though I had no idea if we'd still be in Chicago tomorrow or if we'd be flying home to deal with the nuclear fallout of the past 24 hours. "I'm gonna call Mommy and tell her about the bean," Ruby announced, reaching for the hotel phone. "Actually, sweetheart, let's wait on that," I said quickly. "Mom's probably still in her meetings. We don't want to interrupt important work stuff." Ruby pouted but accepted this. "Fine. Can I order room service again? I want chicken fingers." "Go nuts," I said. "Order enough for Eli too." I'm going to step into his room for a minute. I walked through the adjoining door and found Eli sitting on his bed, staring at his phone with an expression that suggested he'd just seen something disturbing. "What's up?" I asked, sitting down next to him. He turned his phone to show me. It was a screenshot from someone's Instagram story, one of Lydia's coworkers apparently, showing the email from Cassandra Barlow about the terminations. Someone had added commentary. "Why, corporate drama is wild today, popcorn. It's already on social media," Eli said. "Mom's getting destroyed in the comments." I looked at the comments section. He wasn't wrong. People were brutal. Imagine throwing away your career for some old dude with sock issues. The audacity of doing this on company time with company money, loudly crying face. His wife owns the company? That's not just stupid, that's advanced stupid. Bet she didn't see that termination letter coming, LMAO. I probably shouldn't have felt satisfied reading internet strangers roasting my wife's terrible decisions, but I'm only human and honestly, they had some valid points. Let people say what they want, I told Eli. Mom made her choices. Now she gets to live with them, including the social media fallout. My phone started ringing again. Lydia. For like the 50th time. "You going to answer eventually?" Eli asked. "Nope," I said, declining the call. "I've got nothing to say to her right now. And anything I do say, my lawyer advised me not to say until we've got divorce papers filed." The phone rang again immediately. Different number this time, the one I didn't recognize. "That's probably Barlow," I said. Also not answering. "What do you think he wants?" "Probably to yell at me for ruining his life, which is hilarious considering he ruined it himself. Or maybe to beg me not to show his wife the video, which is also hilarious because I already did. Either way, not my problem." The phone stopped ringing and immediately a voicemail notification popped up. Against my better judgment, I put it on speaker so Eli could hear. "Mr. Hale, this is Kenneth Barlow. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If we could just talk man to man, I'm sure we could work this out. What happened between Lydia and me?" "It's complicated. These things happen. We're both adults here. I'm sure we can come to some kind of arrangement that doesn't have to involve lawyers or—" I deleted the voicemail before he could finish. "These things happen?" Eli repeated incredulously. Dude just tried to normalize cheating like it's a weather pattern. "Yeah, Kenneth's not great at reading the room," I said. Which explains the socks on the lamp. My phone buzzed with a text. Lydia's mother this time. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on, but Lydia is hysterical. She says you've destroyed her career and her life. Call me immediately. This family needs to discuss this situation like adults. Patricia." I showed it to Eli, who snorted. "Grandma's going to take Mom's side, isn't she?" "Oh, absolutely," I confirmed. Hurricane Patricia specializes in defending Lydia no matter what she does. I could have video evidence of her robbing a bank and Patricia would be like, "Well, Marcus, you probably weren't meeting her emotional needs, so really the bank robbery is your fault." Are you going to respond? Nope. Patricia can wait too. Everyone can wait. I'm on vacation with my kids. Another text came through. Lydia again, from a different number. Probably borrowed someone's phone since I'd blocked her original number. "You destroyed my life." I stared at that text for a long moment. The audacity. The absolute nerve of this woman to blame me for the consequences of her own actions. I showed it to Eli. What should I say? He thought about it, his teenage brain clearly working through the SAS possibilities. Tell her she destroyed her own life. You just gave it better camera angles. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt good after the past 24 hours of emotional torture. That's actually perfect. I typed back. Nah, you filmed it yourself. I just added a wider audience. Hope Kenneth's worth it. Enjoy unemployment. Thumbs up. Then I blocked that number too. Dad, that's cold, Eli said, but he was grinning. Sometimes cold is appropriate, I replied. Your mom made choices. Adult choices. Now she gets adult consequences. That's how life works. My phone rang again. Patricia. I declined it and texted back. Patricia, Lydia is an adult who made adult decisions. I'm not discussing this with you. If she wants to talk, she can hire a lawyer and we'll talk through them. Otherwise, enjoy your weekend. Patricia responded in approximately 3 seconds. How dare you speak to me that way? I raised that girl. She would never do anything to deserve this kind of treatment. You've always been controlling and now you're being vindictive. I showed Eli the text. See? Exactly as predicted. Somehow this is all my fault for being controlling when I caught my wife in bed with another man. Grandma's kind of delusional, huh? It's a family trait, apparently. I didn't respond to Patricia. There was no point. She'd already decided I was the villain in this story, and nothing I said would change her mind. Some people are so invested in their narrative that evidence becomes irrelevant. Ruby's voice came through the adjoining door. Dad! The room service guy is here. Coming! I called back, grateful for the interruption. We spent the evening eating chicken fingers and watching some animated movie that Ruby picked. My phone continued its seizure of notifications, but I ignored all of it. Lydia Barlow, Patricia, they could all wait. They could all scream into the void for all I cared. Around 9 o'clock, Ruby fell asleep mid-movie, still clutching her Chicago flag stuffed animal. I carried her to her bed and tucked her in, brushing her curly hair out of her face. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, completely untouched by the chaos that was about to reshape our family. We're going to protect her from as much of this as possible, I said quietly to Eli, who'd followed me into the room. Yeah, he agreed. She doesn't need to know all the details. You shouldn't have had to see what you saw either, I told him. I'm sorry you had to be there for that. He shrugged, trying to play it cool, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. It's not your fault, Dad. Mom's the one who should be sorry. She should be. Doesn't mean she will be. We stood there for a moment, watching Ruby sleep, both of us thinking about how much was about to change and how little we could do to stop it. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from another unknown number. Lydia was really working through her contact list. Marcus, please, we need to talk about this. You're being unreasonable. What happened with Kenneth was a mistake. Can't we work through this? Think about the kids. I read it out loud to Eli, who made a disgusted noise. Think about the kids? He repeated. Maybe she should have thought about us before she got in bed with her boss. Exactly. I typed back. I am thinking about the kids. That's why I'm documenting everything for the custody hearing. Have a great night, Lydia. Try not to cheat on anyone else this weekend. Oh wait, you can't, you're unemployed now. Eli high-fived me. I blocked that number too and finally turned my phone completely off. Tomorrow, I said, we're going to the aquarium. We're going to look at fish. We're going to eat overpriced hot dogs. We're going to be a family, just the three of us. And Lydia can figure out her own mess. Best dad ever, Eli said, and I nearly cried. We went to the aquarium like I'd promised. Ruby pressed her face against every glass tank, narrating the lives of fish like she was David Attenborough's successor. Eli took approximately 300 photos of the beluga whales for his Instagram because apparently marine life was aesthetic now. I ate a $7 hot dog and didn't think about my imploding marriage for almost 4 whole hours. We flew home Monday afternoon. Ruby fell asleep on the plane clutching her Chicago souvenirs. Eli spent the flight listening to music and pretending he wasn't emotionally exhausted. I spent it mentally preparing for whatever fresh hell was waiting for us back home. Spoiler alert, it was Lydia. Tuesday morning, I was making breakfast, actual homemade pancakes this time, not the burnt disasters from last week, when someone started pounding on our front door like they were trying to break it down with their fists. Dad, someone's trying to murder our door, Eli called from the living room where he was doing online homework. I looked through the peephole and there she was. Lydia. My wife of 17 years, mother of my children, professional homewrecker, looking like she'd been dragged through hell backwards and then pushed through again for good measure. Her hair was a mess, not the cute messy, I haven't brushed it in 2 days. Messy. Mascara was streaked down her face like she'd been auditioning for a raccoon impersonator role. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that I recognized as one she'd borrowed from me about 5 years ago and never returned. She looked absolutely miserable. Good. I opened the door. Lydia. What a surprise. Oh wait, I'm great at surprises now. Learn from the best. How could you do this to me, Marcus? She yelled loud enough that Mrs. Chin from next door probably heard every word. How could you destroy my entire life? I leaned against the doorframe, remarkably calm considering the circumstances. Let me think. You mean record your betrayal? Document you cheating on me with your married boss in a hotel room that your company was paying for? I don't know, Lydia. I guess I'm just goal-oriented like that. Big on following through with projects. You sent that video to his wife. She was practically screaming now. You got me fired. You ruined my career. Actually, you ruined your own career when you decided sleeping with your boss was a good professional development strategy. I just made sure the right people had all the relevant information. Think of me as a helpful consultant. You love consultants. Her face was turning red, that angry flush that used to make me want to calm her down and fix whatever was wrong. Now it just made me tired. I lost everything. My job, my income, my reputation. Do you have any idea what you've done? Oh, I know exactly what I did, I said. I documented evidence of adultery that's going to work heavily in my favor during our divorce proceedings. Speaking of which, I turned back into the house and grabbed the manila envelope I'd left on the entry table specifically for this moment. Divorce papers. Sign at your convenience. Try not to cheat on the pen. I held out the envelope. She stared at it like I just handed her a live snake. You can't be serious, she whispered. Marcus, we've been married 17 years. We have children. We can work through this. What happened with Kenneth was a mistake. A stupid mistake. Can't we go to counseling? Counseling? I raised an eyebrow. Lydia, you weren't confused about whether sleeping with your boss was appropriate. You weren't having an identity crisis. You made a choice. Multiple choices, actually, over what I'm guessing was weeks or months. So no, we're not going to counseling. We're going to divorce court. She started crying harder, those big dramatic sobs that used to make me melt. Now they just felt manipulative. How can you be so cold? Don't you care about our family? I care about our family so much that I'm removing the person who betrayed it, I said. The kids deserve better than a mother who thinks hotel affairs are acceptable behavior. That's when Eli walked into the entryway. He'd clearly been listening to the whole thing. He looked at his mother with an expression that was somehow both disappointed and detached, like he was observing a stranger throwing a tantrum. Mom, he said, his voice flat. Maybe next time use Zoom for your meetings. Way less dramatic. Better for the environment too, no travel costs. Ruby appeared behind him, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She'd been napping on the couch. Mommy? Why are you crying? Lydia looked at our daughter, seemed to pull herself together slightly. Ruby, baby, Daddy's being very mean to Mommy right now. Nope. I cut her off. We're not doing that. Ruby, go back to the living room. Eli, take your sister. I'll be done here in a minute. Eli guided Ruby away, but not before she asked in her innocent 9-year-old voice. Did Mommy finish her work meetings? I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing at the unintentional savagery. Once the kids were out of earshot, I looked back at Lydia. Sign the papers. We'll figure out custody arrangements through lawyers. You can see the kids, obviously, but I'm going for primary custody given the circumstances. You bastard, she hissed. Maybe, I agreed. But I'm a faithful bastard who didn't destroy our family because I couldn't keep it in my pants. Now if you'll excuse me, I have pancakes burning. I closed the door in her face, walked back to the kitchen, and started laughing so hard I had to sit down. Eli poked his head around the corner. Dad? You okay? Yeah. I managed between laughs. Yeah, buddy. I'm actually pretty great. 3 weeks later, the dust settled. Lydia moved in with her sister across town. Cassandra Barlow sued her ex-husband for $50 million in the messiest divorce Chicago had seen all year. The internet loved every minute of it. Kenneth Barlow became a cautionary tale about terrible life choices and even worse sock placement. As for me, I was free. I cooked breakfast with the kids every morning, pancakes that were only slightly burnt. I learned to braid Ruby's hair, badly, but she wore my crooked braids with pride. I helped Eli start a coding club at school, which he claimed was actually pretty cool for something Dad suggested. One night Ruby asked, "Daddy, do you miss Mommy?" I thought about it honestly. Sometimes. But sometimes missing someone is better than living with them. Eli added, "So when are we surprising someone else?" I laughed. "Next time, let's surprise Grandma. Lower risk, fewer lawsuits." That's how the best-intentioned surprise trip became my greatest comeback story. Because sometimes when life burns your house down, you don't rebuild, you roast marshmallows in the fire and watch everything that hurt you turn to ash.